I meet and come to order. Good evening, Commissioners Wright and Commissioner Culpepper are excused. There's a wait for Commissioner Davenport. I'm sure he's on his screen. First thing on our agenda, Manager Williams has some updates, and I'm assuming that manager is to address some of the questions and things that we have.
Yeah, thank you. Since you, and I really appreciate Sarah and Tim and our finance staff, our budget staff, and the other departments that help compile the information. And we've got handouts for you in front of you. Sarah handed those out, and you've also received an email.
Can I interrupt you for 1 minute? Mayor, even though it's not listed on our agenda this way, do we want to?
So we've already done our 3 years.
So we got our 3, okay. Please go ahead. Okay, Mr. Manager.
In your packet, what Sarah did is took the extra step to, in one big document, do them all. It's called it, you got all the questions since the very beginning of the budget. And so if you're, wanting to go back and say, what did we say about that? It's all right here for you, up to and including the ARPA. I heard you just asking for that, and that's in there along with some other important attachments. So, we can cover any of those questions up to this point. We haven't gone line by line through that. I know that there's some questions that some of you may want to ask publicly, because there were folks that I know, Commissioner Hull, you and I talked about several questions you had that you'd like the rest of the members to know. So maybe, in the interest of time, we'll revisit the questions that you want to, and the ones that you don't want to, you can read. And of course, this is on the budget page of the finance website. So residents can go there and see all of this very same information. So with that, then the other document that Sarah handed out was a compilation of the things that you wanted to see in the budget. And so that's another document that Tim and Sarah are working on as well. And Sarah, you handed that one out, right? Okay. All right.
It's not paper. Blaine sent it to you through email.
Okay.
It's a spreadsheet.
That's a spreadsheet, sorry.
It's basically a spreadsheet that captures all of your priority areas that y'all mentioned last meeting.
Mayor Pro Tem, when you went around the table, said, hey, give me several things you want to talk about, they captured all that and went ahead and stuck it in a spreadsheet that you can manipulate.
Okay.
Of course, I know that we've got 2 different budget CDO proposals at this point, maybe more coming. So with that, if you agree, I can start with Commissioner Hull's questions, and then we can, if y'all want to go back and read some of the ones you asked, go there. And Commissioner Myers, I know you'd asked about NTMP, and I need to do a little search in there, see where that might be, email. So Commissioner Hull, you and Commissioner Myers asked about the capital budget line item with regard to the cardiac monitors for fire. And just so everybody understands what all that means, okay? So these cardiac monitors would be used by our fire department, our trained EMTs, to be able to intervene and provide even a higher level of care. Now, it's not one of those things where you do one truck at a time. We're going to do it all at the same time. And there's going to be time and process and cost to train our staff to that advanced level of EMT. And I think everybody that is in the know with that type of thing, I think, is okay with that idea. And so what we do sometimes, if we have a big budget line item, sometimes we kind of feather it in. We start a couple of years, just like we ought to do with our own households, right? You start saving away so you don't have that one big hit. So what this would entail, y'all, is that there would be 16 of these units, okay? And we've got 9 pumper trucks and 3 ladder trucks. And then the other 4 would be for training purposes. And we've got these things costed out. And I believe that they are $56,000 a piece. And times 16 gets you to $896,000. So it's right at 900,000. We had budgeted 333, thinking a million. And so, ostensibly you could redirect 33,000 of that or reduce that. But the plan that Chief Moss shared with me is that it's going to take 3 years to get to that point where we're ready just to roll it all out. So I think y'all asked a good question. We got the most updated price quotes, and that's where we are. So, yeah.
So following up on that, the reduction that, can you address that reduction that was in there in the budget that we received from the mayor versus?
Yes.
Is that just like
Yes.
everyone's cutting a little here and there and?
Right. Well, so sometimes not scientific, but and we went to a cloud-based capital budgeting system, as you'll know that heard me over the last few years, really going back to 2017, trying to talk to y'all about life cycle and infrastructure. And challenge finance to come up with a robust life cycle program, which is not just on budget staff. Let's be clear about that. This is something that's responsibility of all the departments that do that type of thing. And so we're using a new cloud-based software as opposed to Excel spreadsheets that staff had created. And either way, when I received the capital budget, once staff has compiled it, Sean Holman specifically, it's populated as if everything's funded. So I have a target that I'm trying to get to, and I think this year it was around $10 million or so. You may remember an analysis I shared with you last year that we believe that we're still getting a handle on life cycle costs, but we could easily spend twice that much and still not meet the life cycle of equipment and tools and things that we have taking care of building. So the way that it works, y'all, is I take a first pass. So, and that capital budget this year, Sean, started out at 30 million or?
Yeah, for John.
Yeah, for general fund. We're talking about general fund. And then there's capital for all other funds. So I had to cut $20 million. And I'm gonna tell you, as Blake quoted me, they're not frivolous requests. There are, there's the things that the department heads feel like they need. And so oftentimes when we have something like this, it's important to put some money away, just not fund it, is not really an option, but it does set up where you're going to have to make it up next year, which is an unenviable position because you're still going to have the other 20 million coming back to you plus others. So, and all that, Carol, it wasn't a scientific, it was more of a pass. And then I get it down maybe 7 or 8 million and I have to go again. It just gets more painful. And that's kind of how I prioritize it and make several passes to get to something I can present.
So it makes sense. I mean, you're looking at all, but if that's a priority for us, we can boost it the original one.
And if I could, one important thing is I don't have the luxury of any changes in the tax digest that, the last few years have happened. So, and in this case, I don't think the mayor, we found out that another 1.7 million. So I was dealing with less of a budget to try to make those priority changes. You might say, well, why'd you choose those things? Well, more money came available later, thank goodness, because I know y'all got some priorities too.
Great. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Okay. Commissioner Holt, you also asked about transit. And talk about that. So your question was, you were concerned that we show a projected deficit for transit and that there was an action last year to put some funds into what we, for an enterprise fund, it's not really called fund balance. It's called working reserve, I think is the term. And in the past, when transit was really funded by 3 different sources of funding, and there was a time when it was fairly equal. It was a third fares, and that included the general public as well as money that UGA paid us as part of an approved agreement that y'all always approved. Then there was a federal match, and then there was a general fund transfer. And of course, we went fare free, and then we got some CARES Act money and ARPA money. And then the T-SPLOST passed, and so we were able to supplant the general fund transfer right away, and then later on, the fare free. So in general fund, y'all, we weren't, we've gone back and forth on how much staffing that we project. And that's, now we're starting to fill back up. With the enterprise funds, and there's some formal definitions about that, but let's just say the enterprise funds have a revenue attached to them that is usually coming from a user or a source that fees, that type of thing. And of course, transit doesn't have that anymore. But so for years, we did, we had a working reserve. You'll remember, I think we had $2 or $3 million. And then we got a grant of some of the money that was coming down, I think, through Senator Ossoff and an allocation that we were given came about 10 months late, 7 to 10 months late. And what that meant was we knew the money was coming, but we had to cash flow the operation. So we burned those working reserves, and then the money showed up. But the problem is we had that money, but it's not an eligible use to put it back in the working reserve. So we've been using that. So all that said, last year, not really knowing about the fare free, what, the destiny of that was, I said, well, we burned all of our reserves, so we need to put a little bit back. And last year you approved $500,000. And, normally with the enterprise fund, some of them, like building inspection, we would say, well, at least have 90 days cash. That's sort of a corporate standard. And in talking about this, Commissioner Houle posed a question, well, do we need to bolster, I don't want to rephrase it for you, but do we need to put a little extra money in there? I think is what you were asking me with this deficit.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of trying to anticipate how things can fluctuate and wanting to make sure we have one fair number. Pay more people to run and stuff, or trying to draw more of that federal money down. I mean, the way I've understood it from Victor is we'll get more money from the feds if we start running more routes, but probably a gap between when we start running them and when we get that money. So part of it's maybe, I guess what we could think of as like gap financing as we fill positions and expand routes. And the other part of it is thinking about how we are seeking to expand our transit system with these 3 substations, or transfer stations, I think they're called. And we have a budget shortfall in funding those. And so just something in reserve kind of dedicated for that variety of needs that the department has.
Okay, real quick, and then Mayor Pro Tem, I think Commissioner Lincoln, maybe Commissioner Davenport. So I mentioned staffing. So with enterprise funds, because they have a fee attached to them, and usually, we adjust fees so that they don't run in the red. We budget those at full staffing. So that's adding to the parentheses showing up there as deficit for transit that we, this year is showing a deficit because we're fully staffed, but we're not fully staffed. So what I'm telling you is that I don't think you need to put any more in there. I think we're good because now we have T-SPLOST. It's not I just want everybody to understand, it's not an unwritten check, but it is a source of funding there that is viable. So we will use that, but we don't think we're going to be running a deficit, number one. And number two, in fact, that if we don't do fare free, if we continue fare free, then it's really not an enterprise fund. And so this coming year, we may not, it won't preempt you from going back to fare, so be clear about that. But from an accounting perspective, we may not even need, because we don't carry working reserves or fund balances in individual general fund departments. So without a fee attached to it, if I'm saying this right, finance staff, it's really more like a general fund department. And so we'd say we do away with the working reserve. And of course, if we run a deficit, then you would have to go to contingency or unassigned fund balance.
Melissa?
Yeah, I have a question about transit. Do we have any indication as to when Route 21 might be revived? And is that how that would budget?
I can take that down and find that out for you.
I'm really interested in that. Folks
Okay.
are asking about it. We've got lots of seniors and a lot of lower income folks at Brookside that really need that.
Commissioner Davenport.
You, let me answer my question, about the enterprise fund. So thank you.
So what,
Commissioner Myers.
Yeah, so on the, following up what you said, the transit fund, and I'm looking at page 32, and you're talking about all the positions are staffed, are budgeted for, even though they're not all filled. And that would be the transit operations line then? So that line, do we know how much that was, like in FY 24, that was 4.9 million. Do we know how much of that we used?
You mean today through FY 24?
Yeah, I guess, or I guess what's our rate of,
But how we burn it?
yeah, I mean, is it 25%? I mean, it's in one of those documents we heard. So
Right.
it's whatever that gap is not being spent in that, the number of positions that are still available and open.
Well, let me just say this. We don't believe that we'll run a deficit in FY 24. So it's at least break even. And all that being said, you know, if you think about it, we've got 500,000 in there, and what happens when you put money in there? It's just a well of cash, you know? And I understand the sentiment, like, well, if we're gonna run a projected deficit, then we need to be able to, you don't want to be coming back to the general fund. So I think you were right on it, but as it turns out, because of the extra staffing, there's some cushion there. Is it Tim and Chris, would y'all, did I characterize that correctly?
Commissioner Hall?
so I guess this begs a different question then, which is, should part of our budget action be to redesignate that department as a general fund? You know, instead of
I asked the same question, and finance staff, they won't be able to do that by the end of this year, and they'd like to work on that in FY 25, and that's okay.
So
But you don't need to do, take it.
we don't need to do anything in this budget for that to move forward and for the department to seem solvent financially.
No, I mean, no, I mean, they'll get all that rectified, and then you'll approve that next year.
I guess the only other remaining question I have about transit then is just, we had a discussion, I think, a couple months ago about this with Victor too, and there's this big lingering question mark around how we're gonna fund the transfer stations. So is now the time, or if not now, when? Is it the T-Splosh discussion that's gonna happen later this year? When do we start thinking about the same way we're ramping up for the cardiac monitors in 3 years?
Sure.
Having the sufficient funds to build those out?
Well, so one thing that, again, I've learned a lot from Finance Director David Boyd, and one of the things a few years ago that he was able to correlate very strongly is the increase in general fund transfers with the decrease in your unassigned fund balance. And so, taking that wisdom from a few years ago, we made a concerted effort to kind of control those general fund transfers, and sure enough, now you have unassigned fund balance. So I would just say, with regards to those two things, so one of those transfer stations, you will be, you saw last night, perhaps the one out in the mall. Well, that's several years away, as you alluded to. And we are currently looking at Athens-Clarke Park for the one on the east side, and big win there. I think we got a warrant for a light there, which will really facilitate that. More to come on that. So we are a couple of years away, and I don't know if I would increase general fund transfers now to try to get there, but we do need to be coming back to you with a plan to fund those operations, and that will elbow its way into your priorities in the next couple of years, I'm sure.
Yeah, I guess.
And because it's a recurring cost, it wouldn't, just setting some one-time money aside is not going to solve the long-term funding.
So, hearing that plan still needs to be, it's like fully fleshed out to us. Obviously, not gonna have that by June 4th, but it seems to me like it'd be very good to have that before we have our first meeting about the T-Splosh, the next round of T-Splosh, because we've talked about maybe trying to redesignate certain things that we know we're gonna have to fund somehow.
Yes.
It's gonna be a key element of that, so.
Yeah, and just for everybody, transit is an anomaly. And we got that guidance from the state a few years ago that you can actually use SPOS for operations and maintenance. That's not true of anything else but transit, so.
I'm gonna let Commissioner.
Speaking of transit being sold, of the positions, how many positions they have currently vacant? Cause Commissioner Lake talking about trying to revitalize a route. And if we're gonna expand, will we have the capacity to expand based on, our employment? I know we have a tough time hiring drivers, so we know what our vacancy rate is right.
I don't have it at the top of my mind. It's pretty considerable, but Victor and his folks have done a really good job of holding it all together. And, hopeful that, between the raise, we can retain some folks in the upcoming pay study, we can become more competitive. But I can get you a specific number on that attrition. And that goes, you got it, David?
I mean, it's what
Oh, okay.
they put in.
But
So they got 24 positions vacant out of 83.
and all of the drivers,
I mean, 7.
A lot of them are drivers, paid 7 in this thing. Okay.
or is it this? Oh,
That's that. That gives you the vacancies by department for a select few. Thank you, David. I forgot that was in there.
thank you.
I guess I'll chime in with 24 out of, I think you said 87. I think that was nowhere near the conversation we had when Rich was here about transit.
Well,
I mean, it was high, but
no, this is high. This is, and I just want to say, other folks get to come in and lobby for their staff late in the game. You can see that transit is one of the highest ones on here. So, we talk about folks with positions that are vacant, transit hadn't had a voice up here. So I would say, those folks are, that's a critical need for us too.
well, I guess I'm replaying the conversation we had about one of the problems was finding people with CDL licenses. And we talked about incentivizing so we could get more people to take the test, apply because it could get expensive. And somewhere it got kind of lost. I guess we didn't agree because that's one of the suggestions.
Well, I think we do have a hiring incentive.
We do, and it's a graduated incentive. If they don't have their CDL, it's $1,500. And if they have their CDL, it's $3,000.
Okay.
But my understanding is we will train people without a CDL to get it.
And that's,
And that's the graduated nature of it.
and
Once they get it, they get the bonus.
I don't think that's really getting out there because that was the conversation. I've been on the commission for 5 years. So this is the first since Butch has left that I've even heard that we had that in place. That needs to be on the bill.
Well, and for the commissioners, a good way to see that various hiring incentives is you get I think we send out to the world. Do y'all see the list of vacant positions or that we're advertising for? And use the job, I'm sorry. And just below the job posting for each one, it'll tell you what the individual hiring incentives are.
Somebody else here? Oh, I do, then I have a question. Information that was passed out today.
If I might, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem, I can close the loop on Commissioner Link's question,
Oh.
which is relevant to what we just said. So Route 21 will be dependent on staffing, right? So we get the people to run it, but we got to run our current routes first unless y'all, swap them out. So we're hoping to be able to resume that with the transition to fall service in August, once we come off the summer program.
Are we still running the route between that we had, partner with UGA though, we still running that route?
They agreed that we could drop that. It just wasn't. So now, and you saw it last night, the new agreement does not include that route. UGA is fine with that. So we've said, okay, that's not really a priority. And so we've reshuffled the deck. The reason we did that was because they weren't eligible to receive federal dollars.
Yeah.
So that was a way to kind of convey value to them. But now that they're there, we've gotten rid of that and now we got a new plan.
Our relationship with UGA as far as transportation is good.
I'm gonna tell you, we're working very well together. We always have at that level. And, but we had very good negotiations. Victor Pope did an excellent job. The folks on the UGA side were everybody sort of said, how can we work? How can this be beneficial to both of us as opposed to a kind of a negotiation about what can we get? You know? So it was good. And I asked staff over there what they think, but they're both very supportive of what you're going to vote on.
It was my question about the enterprise funds and, in our packet tonight, it's page 43, I guess it's in our budget too. And you did list all of enterprise funds. Can we get the dollar, where they are dollar wise?
Yes, and they should be in your,
It might be, I'm
your
looking
big
at,
notebooks.
okay.
And could you all call out the page in a minute where you find that?
It's the E section has information on each fund.
It starts
I
at
got E1,
E30,
E30,
the airport and
and the dollar amounts to that, E30?
it starts at E30, right? So E30 to E36
Okay.
enterprise funds.
And explain to me, manager, or give me an example of how these funds are used and when they're used.
Sure. So, for instance, the one that's the biggest and the one that most folks would be familiar with is water and sewer. So, what we do, what y'all do, every 5 years, we have a service delivery plan, and there's three parts to it, and y'all are elements, they call it, and you approve each of those. You know, there's an infrastructure element that details all the projects in the next 5 years that water and sewer wants to work. You know, there's operations and things of that nature. And so there's a big spreadsheet and the needs and the cost and whether or not we're going to borrow money or we're going to try and cash flow it all go into this. And then that determines the projected rates for the next 5 years. And as you know, we don't go like 6 years without any rate increases and then we have a big lurch. We always try to just do it incrementally over time. And it all feeds back to this master financing plan. So those fees that folks pay are the revenues that go into the enterprise fund. So said another way, it's sort of like a business. It's more of a business than because it's taking fees and providing services as opposed to general fund is tax dollars converted into services and things of that nature. So it's sort of run like a business. And I will say there's usually not transfers of money between enterprise funds and general funds. It's not a finance best practice, but we do get some money from the enterprise funds. There's a study done periodically because the enterprise fund, public utilities benefits from, we have a finance staff that helps them that's funded purely by general fund. We have an HR staff, we have an IT staff, so they get a lot of support services. You could argue all the value they get out of the manager's office. But we do charge those, I think somewhere around 3%. So there are some transfers of revenues, but it's paying for a service. And there's a study that backs that up. So that's how enterprise funds work. And I'll say with water and sewer, y'all, it's big numbers, okay? And we carry some working reserve within several, as you'll see. But y'all, that's not that we're sitting on a pile of cash and we just want to keep charging people. What I think is a great story most people don't know is how good a job that we are with life cycle with our water and sewer. I don't know what the current valuation is, but if you were to rip out all the pipes in the ground and have to replace everything, you're talking about billions of dollars worth of value. And you've got to keep that going. And so all that cash, y'all, that 5-year plan has a whole bunch of different projects that go out the door. And if we can cash flow it, we save the ratepayers interest money if we can pull it off. And we did that for years. But with the cost escalation we've experienced in the last few years, we're probably going to have to move towards debt. That's more burden on it that goes for the rates. So that's why you see a lot of cash in there. And we could do an analysis, but within the last couple of years, there's been a lot of capital projects put into play that we're trying to finance.
One example is Baxter Street.
Yes, that's a phase project, and I think that the engineer's estimate, to Commissioner Hamby's point, was around 13 million, and the bid came in at 23 million. So that's an example of where that escalation is really making us rethink what our debt structure will be.
I need to follow up on that, because I continue to need this review on me. For me, the stormwater fund, though, we have a stormwater enterprise fund that comes from our stormwater fees. But we do have we do have needs for other funds, and that's why it comes out as a proposed project in our SPLOST. And is the stormwater is eligible for T-SPLOST or not?
It is.
It is on the two, so.
Those sections that are under a road.
And those are because we have, I mean, I know back in the SPLOST, another one, we had a bunch of, well, and that's because we have more need level of service that we are in agreement with in terms of the water fee.
It's an excellent question and something that the average, person would have no idea. So
Because we do have, I mean, I'm just like, we talk about stormwater needs and everything else like that, as if sometimes in our head, like, we're not sending any money in stormwater, but like, if I'm looking at this fund, there's, the operating revenue is 4.6 million for this past year. So we are doing things, it's just that we have more issues in addition to what this could cover.
well, there's a difference between the use of those funds for operating and capital. And y'all, I don't mean to go on and take your time, but I think there's some really good context here. And I know stormwater is important too. So 3 minutes. Back in the early 2000s, the government commissioned stormwater master plans. And so they looked at the entire community, and there's two types of projects for stormwater generally. One is stormwater velocity, the quantity, the speed at which it goes and how you direct it and how you slow it down. The other part of it is stormwater quality, how we treat that through different types of systems before it goes back to the river. So back in the 2000s, y'all identified all these projects. Many of you will remember where we went into neighborhoods and fixed long-term flooding. I know over in the Beechwood neighborhood, you remember by the Baxter Car Wash, flooded all the time. Over by Oglethorpe Elementary, So there's, all of those got done. And when I came here, y'all, in 2013, I'm like, y'all mean to tell me that there's a county in Georgia that has almost fixed all of its stormwater velocity issues from a flooding perspective? To me, coming from outside, that was a staggering idea. But those are all SPLOST funds, okay? Now, I will tell you that we've not completed all those master plan projects. Commissioner Hamby, I know Castelia is something that we hear about a lot. There are some pretty significant projects that remain to be seen. But all of the SPLOST money, those couple of decades went towards stormwater velocity projects. We haven't even started the stormwater quantity. And as you know, the last SPLOST, and thank you all for doing it, Commissioner Wright, suggested we put at least 500,000. So we haven't been funding all that. So there's a lot of projects out there waiting in the wings. And the reason I go to that detail is your stormwater enterprise fund is not meant to pay for that, okay? In 2006, when the Citizens Advisory Committee proposed the first level of service, y'all approved it, and Commissioner Hamby and Gertz and Mayor Gertz, y'all were here, I believe. You actually reduced the millage rate by the same amount that the fee was. So it was net cost to the average taxpayer. But what it did is for nonprofit state entities, they now are paying in where they weren't having to pay in before. So when you hear about the stormwater tax, that person that's talking to you doesn't understand that, okay? So that was all for operating, just for level of service, no capital. I don't think people, and they said, well, why can't you fix that? Well, it was to clean ditches, y'all, maintain culverts, things like that. Now, over time, we built up a bit of a working reserve there, several $1 million. And thank goodness we did, because about 5 years ago, we started seeing some failures of the big corrugated pipe that was put in 25 years ago, which has a life cycle. And it starts, what it does, that stream runs through the bottom, it takes grit and it eats away and it just it collapses. So we have spent, thank goodness we had that working reserve and we burned that down to zero. Y'all just finished your latest level of service. You upped the level of service and the fee went up slightly. And I think there was also a small amount within that level of service that went towards some capital projects. And I say all that to say that will not get you where you want to go with the master plans, but we are better suited now than we were before to hopefully deal with these emergencies. But I would say when you go talk about the fee SPLOST, that you should consider stormwater because that continues to be an issue for us.
We had talked about setting up a bond to catch up on the failing grade ones, right?
Yes.
Basically to get us caught up so then we can be funding the life cycle through the fund. Is that still a plan?
Yes, it is. And we use the ratepayers. We're going to come back to you, I think, in the fall with a plan for that. But, you know, depending on how you want to pay for it. And I know that that's not sexy, but you have to remember too, that we are an urban regional center. So with a SPOS penny sales tax, there's a lot of out-of-town people helping to pay that too.
I need a little clarification on my question about, it's page 14 in the package that we, received about the cost to install stormwater and, curb and gutter system. Are we saying that, the part of 106 is GDOT right away?
Well, from Loop 10 Bridge to Freeman Drive, staff is saying that, yes, ma'am.
All right, Loop 10, Freeman Drive, okay.
It's considered part of the loop. So when you look at the interchanges, if you were to ever see a right-of-way map, it's a lot bigger than you think. They own a
So
lot.
what about 106? No,
If you'd like us to get you a right-of-way map for 106, we can do that.
no, that was the question I was trying to get to. What would be the cost of stormwater for 106 North?
Okay, well, what is your starting and ending term out there?
It would be right at the Old Hall Road across.
Okay. I will get that for you.
That's what I need. That's 106.
So Old Hull out to the county line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying
Yeah.
that.
And I did have another question, but are there any other questions, guys? Commissioner Hall?
These are kind of the follow-ups with Manager Williams still.
Yes.
So the ballistic vests that we talked about, and there was this question about, we got kind of deep in the weeds about whether we're funding that level 3 protection plus or 3A. The question being, what's the cost for giving all the officers who want them the higher protection, even though it's a heavier plate, to, protect against the caliber bullets that we hear about in these gang presentations.
On behalf of staff, I really appreciate that question. So the answer is, the police would need about $130,000 of a one-time expense to finish upgrading the sworn staff with the ballistic armor that meets that NIJ standard. And that accounts for the inflationary cost since 22 with the fall package. And the standard life cycle for that armor is 5 years. So if we're getting into life cycle, then what we want to consider is about $50,000 in annual operating budget to establish an appropriate replacement cycle and continuing issuing these plates as they reach end of life.
So just to follow on, so that, as I understood it, that would get everybody who doesn't currently have front plates, and then everybody back plates. But are those the sufficient, are those the 3A higher caliber protection plates, or are those the level 3, better than just a vest, but still not actually protecting against these high caliber rounds that we're hearing about?
It's the NIJ standard for special rifle threats. And I'm not as familiar about 3 versus 4, but I can clarify that. But I made a special call to Chief Salters and I said, Chief, I know you sent me this, but is this what we need to take care of what your folks need? He said, yes, this is 130,000 life cycle in the future would be what they need.
And so just 130,000 this year, and then next year the life cycle would be included, or do we need to include first round of life cycle?
I did not clarify that. I believe that it'd be an annual operating budget that we would establish next year.
Okay.
Yes, I think Mike's right, or Commissioner Hammond's right.
Commissioner Davenport?
So, yeah, so if we do the plates, they'll be new, so the life cycle, and they're 5 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road.
Well,
The cycle, correct?
I think Commissioner Hammy's right. No later than next year, probably this year, because remember, we bought some in 22, so they're already starting their life cycle.
And, so that's for the front, not about the back. So it'll be double if you want to do full body.
That's the rest of, so that's everybody who doesn't already have a front one, and then back for everybody. That's what we got in the answer from staff.
That's what DC Kelly told you. Yes.
Yeah. So the only thing that was unclear was whether those were I don't know what you'd call them, high enough rated to be what folks in the gang desk.
You give me a few minutes, I'm clear.
Well, to me, that would be a good expenditure out of ARPA money. I really want to get rid of the ARPA money. And if it's a one-time expense, it's the best for our public safety folk. I saw Patrick's hand up here.
Litter cameras, and I'm sorry I came in late, but you explained you go over the emergency management coordinator.
Yes. So, several years ago, Chief Scarborough proposed reallocating. So for some time, when I came here, we had a separate office of emergency management. And while I was here, the decision was made by all staff that it would be better if it was housed up under the fire department. So it moved up under there. And that person left, Beth Burgess, and they hadn't filled it. And then Chief Scarborough says, I'd like to reorganize my fire department, and I'd like to reallocate that position, because there were times when that employee's out, vacations, sick, what have you. And Chief Scarborough thought it would be a good idea, and at the time I agreed, that he would reallocate that to a division chief. And then between the division chief and the deputy chief, they split it 50-50, okay? And while that, we were able to cover it, it's been, I don't know, 6-7 years since we did that. Just in retrospect, I think the right thing to do is you have one person as the EMA coordinator. And I'll tell you all, when we have an emergency, I take direction from the EMA coordinator. The police chief does, the fire chief. I mean, that person's in charge. And then, of course, we have the hazard mitigation. And then what we want to stand up is a local emergency planning committee, LEPC, which has industry folks, residents, and we're all talking about some of the more frequent threats that come to us, some of the chemicals that industries, and now we're really starting to plug into the community. So I would like to ask that we create that position and have one person in charge of that, still working at the fire department. And then we've got a one seat of accountability.
So, and this is my level of education, so educate me on this position. I think it's a great idea, but for 92 grand, that's just a lot of money. I don't know of the daily details of what this position would entail. Like, you may have a major tornado every 3 or 4 years, or no earthquakes, stuff like that. So, like, what would the daily function of this individual, this office, this person?
I'll answer that, but I believe the 92, does that include the benefits adder? So it's not, they're not going to get 92,000 in a paycheck. They'll get 70 something perhaps. And we have to budget for, the benefits cost of that too, the pension, the health, all those things. So it's like a 30% add, 5%, something like that. Yeah, that's close. That's manager math. These ladies back here give you the decimal point. But there's always an adder when we ask for, because we wouldn't want you just to only do salaries and then we're sneaking in with all that extra. Now, the daily, the EMA director needs to be, and I can tell you, as a young professional, I help counties write their pre-disaster mitigation grants. Nobody needs to talk about it. That ain't gonna happen. I don't want, but you have to keep it in front of people. The LEPC will be something that they'll be doing and establishing relationships in the business and residential community. You know, going to vulnerable populations and helping them understand. I know back in my last county I managed, you know, there was a lot of talk about, well, in Floyd County, y'all, number one threat that thankfully we don't have here, tornadoes. So, you know, we talked about trying to establish tornado shelters and some of the, you know, so there's a lot to be done there to try to keep people on point. It's not just, it's just like our election staff. You might say, well, what do they do the rest of the year? Well, they're doing all sorts of things. Or our budget staff, you know, they're closing out things. So it's not a part-time job for sure.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I think you got my email that I forwarded you, about that particular position. Actually, I think it needs to be a director title. I think it needs to have his own department. When I was at UGA, had our public safety, we had our own emergency management department. To your point, that is very key. And to Patrick's point, you have to constantly update your emergency plan. You have to constantly keep up with what's going on the federal level, on the state level. One thing I was really disappointed, and I'm not sure whether or not I should say this publicly, but when I went to the school district, they didn't have an emergency plan. We had to put that plan together. You know, and my background wasn't that, but you know, we got some expertise to help us. But I think if we're really gonna be serious about emergencies and keeping this community safe, I think it needs to be a director level, and I think it needs to be a standalone department. And I think we need to build from that. So
Well, okay, sir.
I just think if we're gonna do it right, we need to bring in find the best person we can find, hire them based on their expertise. And again, because at this time, just one person, off, let him build, or let her build that department, so it can be a standalone, can really work independently with other agencies around locally, around the state, and on the federal level, if we were to have a disaster or something really bad goes here. So,
Will that position lower homeowners insurance?
Do they, and I would interpret that as, do they play a role with the ISO
Yeah.
rating of 1? That's mostly the fire department response and then the water service supply. EMA may be a small part of that. Tim also let me know that that 92,000 you're asking about includes 19,000 of operating. So you got a salary, benefits, and then some operating in there too. We can certainly do it that way. That's you know, as you all well know, the charter says that the ability to establish, alter, abolish. You know, I would say that this person that right now, thank you, Sarah, would be the rank of a battalion chief in the fire department. Before they were brought into the fire department, it was an office. If you do go that route, I would ask you to just, if you make it consistent, if you aren't going to change officers to directors, then office is fine, or you can make it a director. But if you're going to make them directors, don't make it one office and everybody else a director if you do that. And back in Floyd County, it was a separate department. And I'm not proposing this right now, y'all, because we hadn't talked about it. But besides EMA, LEPC, all the things I told you, and they did a good job. Scotty Hancock was very good. They also managed a radio system. And we put in a brand new system when I was there as manager, and that they also did all of that, which is currently in services. So there's a lot of things that a standalone could do if you wanted. So
I hope my colleagues would consider this. I think it's extremely important. You know, us being a university town, as we continue to grow, I think that particular individual coming in and establishing a department to really manage our emergency management plan here in this community. So
I will say that I do support it, and for the reasons that you mentioned, for those kind of disasters and stuff. But I do agree that the University of Georgia needs to step up a little bit when we are trying to protect the whole Yeah, that's different. But, I saw hands.
And I'm sorry, Commissioner, but they do have their own EMA director.
Well, then I'm
And we
talking
work
about that. That's what I would expect.
Well, I can say, and Steve Harris.
Yeah.
UGA, they had multiple folks last year while we were developing the pre-disaster mitigation plan, so they spoke into it too, so there's a good partnership.
It's a good partnership.
Every time we can highlight that, I think it's important because a lot of times it looks like it's us by ourselves with some of the other players around here.
And they also, not to cut you off, they also had a hazmat team though, that really helps if something goes on in the community, the hazmat team would respond.
Bomb team too.
Bomb team, so they got all those things going on. I think that partnership would be great.
And if y'all didn't know, and I'm sorry, not to belabor it, but I do want to extol the virtues of our partnership that many people don't know. But with our entire radio system, they're on the same radio system. They pay pro rata share of the maintenance of that. And we have a shared 911 system. And so we just flip a switch and the call goes over there. So there's a lot of sharing going on with public safety with UGA.
Okay. Commissioner Myers, Commissioner Lee.
Just on this emergency, this is a broad definition of emergency. So you were just mentioning bonds, but we also have natural disasters. I would assume as well, would it cover things like extreme heat situations where we're looking at people, whether they're homeless need people or people who do not have cooling in their houses and elderly. So it would be part of that person's job would be to figure out all of those emergency responses. It's not limited, but is active shooter, is that someone, would that be, I would imagine the police department already plans for that, right?
Yeah, that usually isn't a public safety agency response like fire. They may be on the periphery. Police is going to handle it. More likely than not, there will be multiple police agencies involved if it's bad enough. But the EMA director would not be calling the shots on that.
Right, but there's also, I'm looking at one for Atlanta, there's all the communications that are involved with that as well. So it's that coordinating of communication to the public is so important. I remember when the Trail Creek turned blue years ago, and it was really hard to find anyone in the county who was responsible for addressing that. And this person would be the person who would be the central person there.
Yes. Now, it does depend on the nature of it, but yeah, most of those emergencies, whether they're man-made or natural, yes, that there's a good LEPC would be talking about chemical spills. What do we do and that type of thing. And I'd also say, there's the information that goes out to the public. There's the possible coordination of volunteers. And there is, and y'all, I think, have recently looked at a contract for debris management. That something happens and there's an immediate response, but sometimes the cleanup and recovery takes a lot of work too.
Commissioner Lake?
Yeah, Ovita kind of stole my comment. GA.
Please,
Yeah, I know it's too late in this budget cycle, but I'd really love to see in the coming months an analysis of, what UGA contributes to public safety and what we contribute, how we work together and what more we could ask of them, because we have gotten, they've certainly upped their enrollment significantly, and our built environment has become much, much more complex primarily because of that. Those high rises that have just popped up in the past decade, we just worked over, what was it, $10 million for new fire equipment. We need more ballistic vests. If an active shooter situation happens, it could very likely be on campus. I'd love to know, do their officers have that kind of equipment? I'd just really like to see a pretty good analysis of how our overall public safety infrastructure between UGA and ACC, who's responsible for what we're paying for what. I know our officers work those football games. What is the cost of that? It's common. It's, normal practice in university towns across the nation where the university puts up a payment in lieu of taxes. And that is often several $1 million, even in towns that are smaller than ours and universities that are smaller than this.
Well, I know, and Commissioner Lynch, I know you brought up the fire fee before, and I just, if the majority commission wants us to look at that, we will, but otherwise,
I'm all for it, and I would hope my colleagues.
I'm happy, I'm not interested.
And what,
Well, and
I said the majority commission. We don't want to go down the fire fee analysis unless most of the commission wants to, and I don't get the sense they do. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I do want to point out a couple of things on public safety generally. So you know that President Moorhead did give $250,000 last year. Even when we didn't give them right of way for some of their cameras, and they gave us 250,000, and the two police chiefs got together and came up with some, so we've expanded our downtown camera network. I think they're putting a shot spotter on campus. At one point, they talked about that. There is an agreement for staffing the football games where UGA does pay for some of that. And of course, a lot of those folks are coming from out of town and aren't students, so some of that's on us too. So we do have a history of shared expenses, not with regards to the fire fee, but I haven't got the sense the commission wants to move forward on that. That's why we haven't moved forward on that.
And I'll add to what Blaine just said. I mean, as far as,
do you have something you want to say, Mike?
I do,
Okay.
so I'll add to what Blaine just said to that. Certainly when you look at property tax payers here in Athens, Georgia, especially the downtown student apartments, out of the top 20, all of them are in the top 20 as far as property taxpayers go. So that money goes towards helping pay for the fire department and fire service. Certainly you can't underestimate the impact that the university population has on our sales tax base here in this community. Just go downtown, probably it's a little slow downtown tonight, but last week at graduation, I mean, you couldn't have gotten into a restaurant to have a dinner or lunch. So, although they may not pay directly for a fire fee, indirectly, they are contributing to us having the ability to put out fires and for our law enforcement to protect folks. I think they're
That's the
working.
case in
I think they're also going to be working on partnering with our real-time crime center and hooking up cameras. So that's a huge thing. Y'all haven't heard about the real-time crime center. That is a very valuable benefit to our community in helping reduce crime.
Anybody else?
actually,
I'm sorry.
Last question is about, how much does those cameras cost?
I don't have that on top of my head, Commissioner Davenport. Give me a minute, we can find it. Glitter cameras.
I thought it was like 50,000, but was it 50,000 a piece or 50,000?
It's not 50,000 apiece, and y'all, just to remind you, Commissioner Thornton, I think, asked for some litter cameras a few years ago to go out and they go countywide, but she wanted to start out Nowhere Road, and they actually were pretty successful. And so if I remember correctly, we'll find out. It seems like $15,000 or $20,000 a piece, something like that. And we bought 3 or 4 of them with the 50, I think, and deployed them, and now we've used them elsewhere. So if you would like to add some more.
I would suggest that we, that program, thank you, Thornton, that was a very successful program. We worked, solid waste and our courts worked to apprehend some of people like to dump illegally, but it is illegal dumping is countywide, just not in one particular district, so we need more. Solid waste just hired a personnel to monitor the cameras, and we just need more to clean up our city.
yeah, I got a bad situation over at Firefighter Lane right now. We just cleaned that up 2 weeks ago. I rode by the other day, the dumped again, and we just gotta figure out who, and we figured it's the same person.
Yeah.
We just gotta figure out how we're gonna catch them. Now, I'm not sure now we got cameras over there, but we just, our sanitation area went by there, got it up. And the owner who owned Japanese Motor Works for our sanitation, he cleaned it up himself. And it hadn't been a week, somebody's constantly dumping in the same place.
This for me is a low cost hit for taxpayers you know, they can actually see that we're contributing, how we're spending their tax dollars wisely.
Great.
Commissioner Hamby?
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna try to take us in a different direction now because I think we need to talk about some big picture stuff
Okay.
and how this budget, you know, when we do the budget, so Kelly and I and Lane and something, those, all of you also, as you see over the years, you know, the budget is a process to get to these situations we're looking at year by year. But, you know, in some ways, I'm hoping that we can start looking, and I know our finance department projects out, but really in my mind, the budget is more of a, it kind of sets the standards and sets the goals for what we want this government to do for this year. But also it's setting goals beyond this year and setting the stage for those bigger pictures. Because as we talked about, we've seen several SPOS projects come to us that may not have the amount of money that's needed because of construction costs. We just heard about the stormwater construction costs that are going up. Went to the library, I went to Costa, I can point especially to the courthouse and finding the dollars associated with that. So I'm gonna pass something around that I've worked on it off of Jesse's spreadsheet. So I appreciate you putting that together. You saved a bit of work. And made a few changes, and it's trying to capture the bigger picture thing. I will say that's about property taxes. I do think we need eventually to do something about property taxes. I think there's a opportunity for this coming November to have a vote that allows us to do something about some type of property tax relief. And I think next year, the opportunity to is it next year? I guess we vote on shifting some sales tax dollars or shifting some property taxes over to sales tax. And you have to do equal amounts of property military reductions. And Melissa, that if we did that gets at what you're asking for. I know it impacts people in our community as well, but it definitely impacts the visitors and the students that we want to contribute to our community in some fiscal way. So if you look at this, and this is just kind of a back of the napkin rough draft sort of thing about what flat dash about what we were looking at. And so if you'll see here, I captured a lot of the stuff that I've heard y'all talk about. The major differences here. I'm going to start up at the revenue, and I want to talk about this is another one of the big projects that we've been talking about. So I have a parking rate increase here. So right now, if we were to raise the tech hourly fee 50 cents and on street to 25 cents, it would capture about $81,000. And Chris, I'll have to send this to you so you can check all my numbers there. But as we mentioned, and the mayor's mentioned this too, about changing the formula for what comes to ACC and what goes to ADA. If we were to do that, then if we were to raise the fees and change the formulas, then our parking, that amount that would come to us would be roughly an extra $48,800. But the selling point, I hope, is that with the extra money that the ADDA gets, that they could use that money to borrow so that they could finish what we need to finish on College Avenue. Am I explaining that correctly, Kelly? Or College Square, so that you could see and they could do that, you know, with the public input, but it can move quickly and get that off of our plate so that we can then transfer some of those SPOS dollars to some of the other projects that we know are going to be running short. The second thing here is, you know, obviously affordable housing is a topic of discussion. And, you know, if you look at what Invest Atlanta does, they offer a lot of incentives to different private developers and they have goals that they have, like, you know, Mayor Dickens is saying, I'm going to build 10,000 affordable units or repurpose some buildings for affordable units over the next couple of years. And he's using Invest Atlanta to help do that. But this, the $5 million that we have here could be used as seed money to do some of the things that was in the affordable housing strategy, or how we can incentivize those type of investments. And certainly like the repurposing of existing buildings and existing homes. What this does, I did take out I just kind of moved the words around a little bit because I took out the strike fund part of it so that you don't limit yourself in that regard. So, there may be some possibilities for us to buy something, but there may be more possibilities for us to encourage some single family redevelopment or single family homes or some sort of incentives there. So that is maintained in there. And I will point out too, Major Williams mentioned this to me, that in addition to the 5 million, there's also roughly 3 to 4 million in the current affordable housing SPLOST program that has not been allocated yet. So, and I did put back in here, we didn't during CVG have any, we usually have some sort of housing counseling associated with CDBG. We didn't this year. So I did put it in the budget. I think that's a key component to any type of, we're trying to encourage people to buy homes or get into a home, and certainly some sort of housing counseling, I think has been beneficial and has shown itself to be beneficial. Dexter, and I know you were looking at the sheriff's office, so that's in here as far as being on parity with the ACCPD. And as you see, Jesse, I kept some of the stuff that you had here for the state court. I did take out that there were the ARPA requests from the DA. ARPA. In my mind, those positions are for ARPA positions, and if ARPA runs out, then we have to answer that there. Having it at this point in time is probably appropriate. See what else here. Ballistic vests I thought were important. As you can see down at the bottom, though, I was trying to do what Commissioner Thornton mentioned earlier, is to move some of the dollars, that one-time fees, one-time expenses to the first, like, well, the court supplements in there that we talked about last night, the EMS cardiac, the communications to help with their public information, which is becoming all the more important as we move along these days. And so within that, you had roughly 384,000 in budget balancing for ARPA, and then you had another $765,000 that could be used from the administrative. The one thing I did add in here, y'all, that's trying to look long term is at the SPLOST project, and it's particularly at the Judicial Center. I just can't emphasize enough how, when you're trying to put all these pieces together, the Judicial Center is a key component that's going to help this community save dollars and allow us to transfer some of the property we own and utilize, like this building, into affordable housing or back on the tax rolls. So the quicker and the sooner we get that built, and the sooner we can see the vision of combining all of our government operations into one building, I think the more this community is going to benefit, and I think the more dollars this community is going to save. And I know that's being worked on, but I think having $3 million in here to help supplement the 70 million that's currently available, it's not going to go a long way, but everything is going to help at this point in time. That's it in a nutshell for right now. There's probably going to be some more additional things. I know Allison was talking about a need for solid waste to keep Athens-Clarke beautiful, the bulk pickup stuff. She talked to you about that and what the cost
The bulky waste.
bulky waste and what the cost associated.
Septic tanks.
Because the bulky waste, Patrick, to your point, would get at, if people don't have anywhere to put the bulky waste, they may dump it somewhere where they can't. But if we offer some sort of bulky waste service, then that might negate some of the needs for some of the cameras associated there.
Okay,
So I guess, and just one final point, and then I'll hush. I guess, and I appreciate Jesse putting together his initial spreadsheet because that helped a lot, and appreciate staff putting together the boxes. So you become real experienced at working with this. If you haven't seen it, you pull your hair out if you had any left. But the thing is, using this budget to try to address some of the shortcomings that I know that we can see coming forward, like College Avenue, like the courthouse and some other SPOS projects, because the more you can get those going, the better off this community is going to be.
Commissioner Davenport. Again, Commissioner.
Now that the election's over, so I do have some, and just me, I do have some concerns about this, Park County, Sheriff Office salaries and benefits parity. This is me, and this is from listening to some of my constituents, like, when there's a homeless person in someone's backyard, they're gonna call the police, they're not calling the sheriff. When there's a traffic accident, it's gonna be the police. And there are certain people who feel that the two jobs when it comes to, daily operations, whatnot, don't equate. And then when you think about, all of our public safety officials, fire, MS, all of them, that we're picking and choosing our favorites. And I just think a more holistic study, I know we hate studies, would benefit. I think it would benefit, but just me, I am prejudiced. That's my fault. I think our police officers have to do a much greater and finer job at protecting our community. And it's no disrespect to the sheriff office, but I would rather us do a study, and that's me.
Commissioner Hall?
Yeah, I guess I have a bunch of questions that are mostly in the weeds, just to try to make the math work. But I guess the couple big ones for you, Commissioner Hamby, and I appreciate you putting this together. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's too much distance between what you've done here and what I had put forward a couple days ago, which is really encouraging. But trying to stay like higher level on the questions first. One question I have is on the version that I shared out, it basically set in motion establishing. I'm sorry, y'all. The version I had sent out set in motion establishing the 3 funds that are in that staff recommendation as like the priority places to start based on the affordable housing investment strategy.
Yeah.
And one of those is the strike fund, and I see how you basically like taken that as a line item and absorbed it into this. But I guess to keep it simple, like what are your thoughts on doing that same thing, maybe changing the numbers of it to leave some of that money as like flex funding and the umbrella fund that could go to any of the 3, but at least getting those 3 specific funds in motion?
I kind of saw this as being flex, the whole thing being flex fund. So if there was a need to purchase something or a need to do the other 2, then it's there to draw from.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear others' thoughts. I personally feel a bit more comfortable if we use at least some portion of it to dedicate to each of those 3, just to make sure that we're getting the ball rolling on each of those 3 types of projects, because I think they're all important. I'm not attached to necessarily obligating the entire 5 in one place, but I think it'd be good to just make sure like we've made a commitment with some dollars that we are going to start funding these 3. And then to your point, seeing what comes before us can determine where we put the rest of what's there. Because I think the gap financing for light tech projects is really important. And we've certainly heard from everybody that the single family housing is really important. And so, making sure we're having some for both, I think. But again, I welcome others' thoughts on that. I'm mostly just glad to see that there's agreement on the general concept. I think that's really important. I'm curious with the ARPA money. So I had pulled just 765, which was the equivalent of what staff told us is like kind of available in administrative funds.
Right.
But you brought that up by another 329. So I'm just curious, like where in the ARPA?
The budget, the line on the budget balancing for 23 to 27.
Okay, I thought I had understood that that was already included in the mayor's budget. Well, as part of this year's budget, like elsewhere.
We can say, so the idea was, I think the first year, it was like $2.2 million. And we, as staff, we said, well, you know, that's this year. If you don't do something next year, you gotta, the first 2.2 million of new revenue's gotta go to something that's already existing. So we stepped it down over time. It's nowhere near that now. And what is the figure this year's, y'all? Can't remember.
343.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, I see that Commissioner Hamby's using most of that three, but my question, I guess, is that 343 already accounted for in the budget?
Yeah, it's already in the recommended budget.
Okay, so we don't actually have that available as a separate line item to pull from, really, if we're thinking about.
Well, you could pull from the future years to do it, but then just know that you gotta backfill that in the future.
Well, and the other thing too, Jesse, is I didn't take as much of I didn't utilize as much of the fund balance as within yours, so you could certainly add back.
The 343 is, yes,
Oh, that's the remaining for all of it. Okay.
that's it. And that's already included in the mayor's recommended budget, so it's not available.
Oh, we were gonna step it down further and the mayor went ahead and aggregated it, or we're just gonna spin it out?
That is the step.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the,
That's the last step.
Thank you.
so there's something there for us to clarify, I guess, like what we're doing about that 329, it sounds like. And then I might be missing something here, but I had 10.2 million roughly, and yours is 10.9. So I'm actually, that was my other question for you, because it looks like yours pulls a bit more from unallocated fund balance. But again, this is all estimates. Mr. Taylor was key to point out when I was going back and forth with him about this, but my understanding was that 10.3 million roughly is what we can think of as like available above the threshold after we do the, 85% thing. I don't know how different that is if some of it's going to happen.
Actually 9.9. Yeah, if you go up a line, the 9. Fund balance changes 9.
The millions back fund back in.
I did.
Okay.
So,
I see. Okay,
well, and Mayor Pro Tem, if I might, just a couple comments.
that makes sense.
First off, both these versions got us a lot further than I thought we would have, and that's gratifying, that we're this far along. Couple notes. One is Commissioner Davenport, your point, totally understand the need to bring the sheriffs to parity. I just want you to, know that the fire department and corrections will be right behind it next year probably. So, in probation. So the other ones, if we're going to establish parity, they're going to come and say, well, we like the same deal, which kind of gets us back to where we used to be. Second thing is just be careful in either one of these versions where you're using one-time funds. Some of these are operating expenses. So what that means is, for instance, I did some quick calculations. Approximately 3 million of these solutions next year. You'll burn this fund balance, and so the first 3 million of next year's new revenues, unless you dismantle any of this, will have to go to pay for this before we do salaries and benefits and stuff.
Well, one thing I'm sorry, Carol, and then Commissioner Fisher, and then I'm going.
And Mayor Pro Tem, I have one note.
Okay.
I like that we're in a place where we can work things out. I appreciate that. I was just wondered on the 3 million, I had a couple of questions on the judicial supplement, going to move that over. So you're looking at, I'm looking at, pulled up the SPOS program. I'm well aware there's all these programs, well, we got the library and everything else. Right now, there's about a $29 million revenue variance and 951, so it's unallocated interest. So we do have 30 million there. It's clear that could be spent on all these projects and the overcost. So that would be, I'm assuming that somewhere down the line, we're going to be looking at that money and moving it perhaps to some of these underfunded projects because of the increase in the construction costs. We haven't discussed that, right? We have all these things down the line. So, but then on the affordable housing, I kind of like the idea of designating a little bit more closely in here. I mean, with the affordable housing investment at 5 million, theoretically, that could be like the North Athens, Bethel, like we could say, okay, we're just gonna put the money onto that project because it's underfunded, the way this is set up. Right? Am I correct?
Well, it could, and certainly it could. And I would argue that if that's the case, I mean, I think the Bethel project has proven that they're building one build. At some point, they come back to this extra funding.
But that would be,
We need to listen to.
that would have the leeway to do that or to go, I mean, that's what yours is putting forward.
Exactly.
And, you know, one of the things on the sheriff's pay and thinking about those other ones, you know, I'm just throwing this out if it needed to be, because are we having is that study already in the plans for the public safety officials?
Folks in HR, what's our cadence with the pay analysis with non-public safety and public safety? Remind us where we are there.
So we are working on contract for the unified plan.
Unified.
And public safety was done in 20. Wait a minute. There's been, you know, like a few one-offs, so 21, and then, yes, in 21. So that one would be a little bit further out if we were looking at the site.
So conceptually, a year or 2 years after the non-public safety analysis, so we would do public safety again on something like a 5-year cycle.
So I'm listening to what, like Commissioner Davenport is saying, hold off until you do, you'd rather put money towards doing the salary study sooner? Is that what you're saying?
Or just, yeah, we possibly do it sooner. We did have a sheriff study done last in 2023. Correct me if I'm wrong, HR, that increased their salary by five grand or 6 grand. So we do have that, but I don't mind putting it off for till the next cycle.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah. And I was just, to my follow-up, and then you can respond with like, and I'm not married to any of this, is that they're, you know, instead of doing the full funding, we could do half the funding. That's just something one could, some room, but respond ahead.
Well, I guess I'm just looking at page 7 of this document that Blaine handed out.
Mhm.
That this, I mean, obviously sheriff has done the red area, which means there's
Yeah.
48. It's got the highest vacancy
Yeah.
of any of the areas of government that we're trying to serve. And
Oh, yeah, no, that's why I brought it up the first time. I see that as an issue.
Commissioner Fisher?
So 2 things I want to address. I want to address the sheriff pushback, Commissioner Davenport. They do serve warrants. They have to go out and serve warrants. When we look for people to be arrested, they have to transport prisoners. They have to protect the courthouse. And to me, we need to be thinking about trying to protect the people that work out there. When you understaff and you got a full jail, it makes it difficult for those individuals. So I'm looking at it from a safety standpoint for those employees. And to me, I think we're in an emergency crisis in my mind with 38 vacancies. I think this will help with that. And again, Manager Williams and I, we disagree on the study because I just feel like they the same, you know, and again, you look at it in type of way, but I think our sheriff department, our ACPD, both departments do great jobs. I just think that when you got people's lives are in, and that could be threatened, and we give it as a commission, really need to be taking a look at that and making sure that those people out there are protected, that's protecting those prisoners. And I'm glad crime is down, but we get an uptick this summer, you know, folks gonna be going to jail. So that homeless person that's trespassing, he going over to jail. Somebody got to look at him. So I just push back a little bit on that. As for the affordable housing thing, I'm gonna agree with my colleague, Hadby. if you look at what they're doing in Atlanta, and that's why I'm glad you used the word investment. And what I would like to see what we do with this money is we set some priorities. Let's say that we're gonna build 10 affordable housing. Or we're gonna fix up 10 houses. We have the flexibility in this particular, but to do all those things. To your point, Commissioner Myers, if the Bethel project needed more money, we could do that. We're not trying to say, well, we're gonna take the money from this particular fund to help them. So this is, I think, again, one person's opinion, I think this gives us a lot more flexibility. We won't have to spend it all in one place. We could, but we can spend it in a variety of places. But this, I think this 5 million gives us flexibility. And hopefully, I'm hoping it's gonna generate and get builders involved and want to build affordable housing, because this money will be available. I'm really excited about what's gonna happen with First American Bank and those funds that they got. I do want to present this, Mayor, a little bit off the cuff. You know, we're looking at the AMI out of out of the track, 65%. We may want to possibly raise that because again, my concern is I'm not sure we're gonna have enough people to be qualified. Because I looked at that threshold, man, it's almost not, Jimmy making a whole lot of money. So I'm hoping we can really open it, because I want to look at the school teacher go in the bank and get that money. Probably what they get paid, they probably can. Our police officers, based on their salary, or sheriff office. So I will hope we would take a look at that as we work with the bank. And we try to raise that to give people an opportunity that maybe make a little bit more money. And they can also qualify to get those funds. But I'm anxious to see how that's gonna come out once it gets started. So that's my 2 cents.
I'm gonna step out. Oh, did you have something to say, Mayor?
Yeah, I did. I wanted to just address the question of public safety pay. You know, maybe you've heard from Manager Williams a number of times that pay isn't the only factor. We recognize it's an important factor, but it's not the only one. But when it does come to pay, when we entered the public safety pay plan environment about 4 years ago, that was entered in a very structured manner. You had all the public safety chiefs come together. Obviously, some of those were different individuals that are in those seats now, but they all sat around the table and looked at how to do something that used a common tool of analysis. Talking about now is taking an arbitrary approach and not using a common lens of analysis. So I'd caution everybody about that, because we do have some other units out there, probation, corrections. There are dozens of employees collectively in those units. And as you heard from Manager Williams, they're watching all this too, and understandably so. I mean, not to say that there doesn't need to be some more analysis of the sheriff's department, but I would strongly advocate for following very quickly on the heels of the non-public safety study to just move into a full public safety study. And if you want to advance that and do that in this coming year, put the money for that in there. As a comparative, I'd look at what the state does with those who are in state patrol versus those who are in the Department of Corrections. Those are both public safety units of the state of Georgia. Their gap is much wider than our gap. Our gap between sheriff's deputies working in jail and those who are policing the streets through ACCPD is relatively narrow compared to that gap between Department of Corrections and State Patrol. Those numbers up online right now.
Yeah, Mayor, I was going to say, if I knew you were going to say that, I probably just would have ignored you. Let me say this though, and I'm going to go back to Mayor Pro Tem role. First of all, I think that the Judicial Center, I think that should come out of ARPA. I don't think it should come out of general budget. I think that that would free up some money for these other positions and things. Also, I think that I would feel better where, I'm not clearly understanding, well, let me say this. Under the stormwater, I would have rather for that to be spelled out as infrastructure. But again, I would like that to be out of ARPA money. We are so behind on North Avenue, and there are other areas if you want to jump in, but we are so behind in everything with paving, lights, stormwater, sewer systems. One time we could fix that and be be made whole like the other community. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I think Mike minus out the DA's lost revenue because of the grant. That grant, yes, we lost it, I understand, but it's going to come back next year.
I think
So
he kept the grant and he minused out the ARPA funded positions.
I think the ARPA funded positions are probably valuable too, but I'm not gonna fight about that. But I do think that the judicial system and infrastructure should be ARPA money. And the last thing was,
$100,000.
the $100,000 we put in, for, victims advocates, and it was designed when we were having all those gang deaths but it was designed, really to work with the, African American co-op. But it went to the DA's office, and from what I understand, it's still there. And that, Manager Williams will go and see how we can get that money, being used, from victims and families of gang violence and domestic violence. So,
I do know that Miss Smith, who lost her baby, the 3-year-old, they are taking advantage of those funds.
okay.
The entire family is getting, counseling, and she got reimbursed for some of the funeral costs.
Okay. See, we don't even know about that, so that is just happened, and we've had deaths a bunch before then. And I understand when the DA made her presentation, how she had to shift her attention to paralegals because she was short, and that's why those funds, I guess, didn't get done. But whatever you can work out, I'm not suggesting taking it from the DA's office, but I do emphasize that I would love to see people of color in these roles because these deaths and these violences are families of color.
And if I just real quickly, so that $100,000 was part of a CDO, and I really want to thank both authors for putting more detail in here, and I would encourage you, whatever the final budget solve is, that you put that detail in there. I made an assumption. I don't know if we had that discussion about the African-American counselors, makes perfect sense. When that $100,000 CDO came through, really the only place that in the government where we did that type of thing was a DA. So I just said, okay, finance, let's put it in the D. And then later on, Commissioner Thornton educated me that, well, this is really what we wanted to do with it. And so I will go talk to the DA. And what I'd like to do, and when y'all vote on it, I'm sure you'll want the detail too, to know exactly what's going to happen. And you can hold me and staff accountable. Well, did it happen? And I will go see Commissioner Thornton if there's any extra funds there and any additional clarity on what you'd like to see, please let me know and I'll share that with the DA and we'll see what we can do.
Let me see. Who was listening?
Yeah, I just want some clarity regarding the housing fund. When we passed the affordable housing strategy and had a CDO attached to it, a huge chunk of the intention of that CDO was to assure sustainability of a fund. Do we have a plan for that sustainability? And I'm talking about soliciting private funding to have a maintained fund, much like they do in Atlanta with that Invest Atlanta. Can we begin a discussion on how to establish that kind of entity to assure that this is an ongoing sustainable fund that delves in the housing counseling or all these other needs that, we need to pursue when it comes to affordable housing and economic development?
Commissioner Hamby wants to answer that, but can you yield to Commissioner Hamby to answer that question, Commissioner Hu?
I was just gonna say, a lot of communities, they probably dedicate a portion. This is something we can talk about next year if we look at restructuring how we're generating revenues to pay for the government. But a lot of communities do have a dedicated percentage of their mill rate to go to this. Roughly 5 million would probably be about what's 0.75 mils or 0.6, somewhere around there.
They also have ongoing.
So- And we used to dedicate a portion of our millage rate to the hospitals, as a matter of fact, when that was going on. So there is that, but, certainly it's a question we can put before the community as well, if they want us to do that with our millage rate. But I will say this about the ARPA dollars. There's not that much in ARPA dollars that are left that haven't been committed, unless we're gonna take anything away from, there's no money left from affordable housing, 26,000 youth development. I mean, I guess we could take the 3.2 back from where we committed it. Or workforce development's got 3.8 million that's in there that we haven't really committed yet, but something's on the table for it. So I guess all that says, I was looking at our, wondering the same thing, but when you look at the chart on page 39, there's not a whole lot left to play with.
I thought we were at one point, and maybe that's before maybe I didn't minus out what was dedicated, because at one time I thought we were at 11 mil. No, we're not, so that was,
Yeah, we're 9.5 million right now.
we're 9.5 right now with everything that's promised out, we're at 9, right?
But that's assuming that we don't do anything with the youth development money and or the workforce.
So then he's right then it's,
So I think it's easy to get that confused. So you've allocated some buckets,
right,
and that's within the 9 million, but everything else you've actually dedicated or awarded to certain entities. So it's all, there's committed versus allocated. And so the allocated is still out there. You can change it if you want to.
what's the allocated?
Allocated is like you got 3 million for youth development, but you're not yet giving it to anybody. So it's allocated, but not yet committed. So there's 9 million allocated, but not yet committed. Everything else has been committed.
Commissioner,
May I have just like a few minutes?
after Commissioner Hall, it's gonna be Commissioner Fisher and then Commissioner Davenport.
Then me.
I really appreciate Commissioner Hamby's rundown, but I'd just like to kind of explain some of the things that I had in mind that weren't in Commissioner Hamby's, just so we can have that on the floor. Before I get there, just working off of yours, Commissioner Hamby, I think if we just take that above 765, so the 329 in ARPA, and move that to unallocated fund balance, we end up basically on par between the two documents, but you're still under that bring it up to 10.3. But still under the 10.34 million. So that's the easy solve there, I think, for the ARPA question. And there's some other tweaks I think we'll have to make from the updates from Manager Williams, which we can maybe get to later. But for example, bringing the ballistic vests up from 114 to 130, I think that's to get the higher caliber ones. And then reducing the cardiac to 100.
Was it at 100?
Cardiac was at 133, but we've now learned that 100 is sufficient for the 3-year plan. And then ballistic vest was at 114, but we need 130 to do the higher caliber ones.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I guess we just need to figure out how we want to specify that housing counseling line. I think that makes sense to include. But just what do we want to like specifically ask staff to do with that? Like send out an RFP for what or whatever. But I mean, I think the main differences here, and I guess there's a few other small things I wanted to run by the manager that we never got to in that portion of this, but like they came up at the agenda setting around the judge pay equity, which I think you've got here, Commissioner Hamby, as 120. Is that the amount that we need to be good with that?
Yes, and if I might, in the agenda item, as you saw, we were recommending it come from that ARPA 765. So Mr. Hamby has found a different way to make that happen. So if y'all go that route, we'll just have to make that amendment to that vote.
And do we need anything for the corrections health services contract? There was kind of a longer back and forth about that last night. I don't know.
Okay, and I didn't see it.
I don't believe so, but Tim's got to see that.
The expenses for that are in the mayor's budget.
Okay, cool.
What was not in the mayor's budget was the state contract revenue, the increase from $22 per inmate to 24, that was not in news. That's 124,000 additional revenue.
Okay, so we don't have to cover the like 200 and change of
It's
the
already
contract.
covered.
Okay, cool. And then Manager Williams, you mentioned 70,000 for the city hall security plan to be followed through on, so we'll have to find a way to add that in.
If I could, just real quick, Commissioner, I told the two authors of CDOs this. So Andrew Saunders, Central Services has gone and priced. We've heard you say, we want to be able to screen for weapons at City Hall. And state laws, we've been told by the attorneys, means just can't do it selectively. You got to do it the whole time the building's open. So to go from where we are now for City Hall security, to be able to wand folks during business hours, it's 70,000 extra dollars. And then that'll happen. And then, of course, we'll work with our police to do the meetings for wanding and all that.
And then I think one of the remaining points of contention around the sheriff's office salaries, that sounds like maybe the compromise way forward is to fund it, but then also fund a salary study. So I guess we need to figure on what that would cost to do.
Say that again.
If the compromise way forward on the sheriff's salary question is to fund it in this budget and also fund a salary study, then we need to know how much to budget for a salary study.
Although to be clear, my suggestion was the salary study alone and then make some further modifications in subsequent years.
Sure, I understand that that's your suggestion, but obviously not. I'm reading the room, right? So can I just go through I had some capital projects things on here and I just.
Hold up.
Explain where they came from.
Hold up. Anybody want to speak to anything that Commissioner Hall has brought up? Oh, you getting ready to cry.
Me, I no.
Can you
Just
just
to decide
hold up for a minute, okay? I know you're on the roll. Hold up. Carol, no, was it you next?
No, let them go.
Okay, Carol,
I mean, on the sheriff's study, what I had suggested as a compromise to get the money would be to put a partial salary boost and use the money perhaps for that salary study, perhaps also for the food that we have included in here, that Jesse has included in here as well. And while I have the floor on the ARPA, you know, what you're talking about is putting it towards infrastructure, right? And that's not all gonna be spent between now and December. So we can continue with these programs that we're saying, and we don't have to feel obligated. I personally don't feel obligated to say, I'm gonna spend every single penny of that. If we have good programs, yes, but we could also feel that we have $2 million left over, then we can put that onto capital. That's the way I'm thinking about it.
if we didn't already have capital needs, I could agree with you, but there is capital needs that need to be paid for one way or the other. So when you have these one-time expenses,
Yeah.
let's get them off that's the way I'm looking at it. I'm not making up stuff just to say, oh, well, they have, no, I'm just saying, just to spend this because they haven't had a plan yet. I'm saying there are some things that you don't even need a plan. They just need to be, addressed, that's all.
Yeah.
But I'm open.
It's just, we do have that workforce group that's working that complements it because it's looking at some things that the David Bradley one isn't looking at. And in addition with the youth money, that's unclear. And I know that Tiffany, we have that resolution we want to put forward after we had that discussion. And that's some of that youth money. That's where we could be following up on that because,
I'm gonna say this about all, and no disrespect to the mayor, those plans did not even have my support from day one. And I don't understand why we have two workforce development groups. I don't understand that. And I'm about like Patrick, I'm very prejudiced now on how the money is being directed. So it's not your work.
Oh, yeah.
that I'm concerned about.
I agree, actually.
It's not your work. God knows it's not.
I agree.
Commissioner Lane? No, I'm sorry. Wait, Bessie, hold on for one more minute. Go ahead, Commissioner. Be quick.
I just have a quick comment on the concept of using ARPA for infrastructure, was particularly stormwater infrastructure, when we can turn to T-Splosh for that. We will be looking at a new T-Splosh in the fall, where the ARPA has a much broader possibility of spending it, programming and things.
And that's my point, Melissa. These programs are just revolving. And I'm saying, even if we.
Well, I'm having people come to me, especially with youth development programming, who have not gotten any of this funding yet.
Well, see, that's where we differ at. And I'm, like Patrick said, I'm very prejudiced now. Because no matter what you bring in T-Splosh, you will never, ever,
I mean,
you will never address a side of a community that has been left out always. Now,
T-Splosh is specific projects.
I have specific,
Yeah.
projects.
Those specific projects.
Can we hear from Jesse?
Yes, Jesse, come up.
Think about the sheriff's office.
Okay.
I understand the problems with, a salary increase as far as like the equity with other public safety agencies. I understand that's problematic. And, perhaps a salary study is what we do need. But I would like to see us at least get a significant bonus, a hiring bonus for these folks, so we can get those numbers up, because it's critical at the jail. Like, we got.
So, and just to remind everybody, so the police department wrote a grant. They got a grant to do just that, and they were using it for the police department. So the police department was at 10,000. And in that time period, I authorized the sheriff's office because of their vacancies, and we have a policy around it. We went to 6,000, and the sheriff in our quarterly update said, can you help us? And so I went to Chief Salters and I said, hey, how much do you have left? And I said, because you're filling up, are you going to be able to spend all the money? He said, well, at this point, it looks like we're pretty good. And I said, would you ask the granting agency, since it's a partner, same government, public safety? And they agreed that they would allow the sheriff to do that. And Chief Salters last week sent the information to Sheriff Williams. Sheriff Williams thanked him for it. And then we're going to be seeing about going ahead and augmenting that. Now, that's not what the sheriff asked for all the way, so I want to recognize that. I'm not suggesting that that's going to satisfy him, but he's grateful for that, and the police are willing to share and partner together.
Is that going to be enough to get them up? Because don't they need like?
That's just a bonus. That's just a bonus.
It's
It's just a bonus.
It's a recruitment incentive. It's
Yeah.
not a long-term retention.
Yeah, right,
It gets you in the door,
right.
That's right.
but the retention, I think, is part of the sheriff's request too.
Yeah, maybe that bonus gets supplemented this budget for like long-term retention.
Commissioner Rules?
Thank you. Just have one remaining question, which I'll save for after so I can get through it. But it's about the solid waste composting education specialist that it sounded like a bunch of us were interested in the work session. And I don't know if and where to put that in the budget, but, so on the version that I gave y'all, there's a bunch of capital projects listed. And I guess I just wanted to kind of make the pitch for why I picked those, because it sounds like we're kind of decide between those and the judicial center, like what do we think is the best place to put this funding? So all of it at the end of the day is dealing with, I think, what we can call a backlog, like catching up on years of underfunding. So I don't necessarily think that like putting money towards the judicial center where there's a shortfall is like a better or worse idea than some of these things. I just kind of wanted to clarify what these things are. So we've talked a lot about central services, and for existing facilities, if you look at our budget, there's an over $2 million shortfall between what was requested and what's funded. So that 500,000 is helping make up the gap, basically bringing up the total to half of the request. We could really do a lot more than that if we wanted to. And that's just the life cycle maintenance that Manager Williams is talking about. A couple smaller ticket ones are the tree hazard and landscape and community tree program. But if you all recall, last year, we got a letter from the tree council about that. And we've heard from some staff too, that small amount of money can make a big difference in the safety of our trees on our streets and what they're able to do. The communications is involved already, so I guess that's not much of a debate. But the TPW stuff, these are probably the ones I feel the most passionate about. So the signal replacement, I don't know if y'all recall, this was like 2 years ago, but we got a presentation from staff about our traffic signals being so behind that there's a risk of electrocution to do maintenance on them. And so I feel like I don't want to say, I feel like it's our responsibility to fund that as much as they're asking to try to catch up on what's essentially a worker safety hazard in addition to one of the many, capital project backlogs. And then, the overhead street name signs, I was doing that based on all the discussion we had recently had about signs, but there's a good argument for that not necessarily being as important. But the next three, roadway safety devices, safe routes to schools, and local road improvement projects, those are all completely like safety-based projects around the exact kind of things we were talking about all the time in our committees and in commission meetings. And it's for pedestrian safety and vehicle safety. So each of those capital requests have kind of different specificity on what they're going to go for, but they're all about improving safety. And so those seem quite important to me as well. And then the sustainability requests are pretty small ticket compared to everything else as well, but I feel like we might get a lot of bang for our buck in terms of long-term planning and energy savings as well as resiliency there. So if I was personally saying like where I'd like to maybe take a bit away from the judicial center funding to fund some of the stuff here, it would be those TPW safety things.
I'm fine with it. My point about having, if you don't mind,
Sure.
the reducers that are on there is so that it maintains a priority for us. And when we talk about the budget, I know it's a priority, but when we just like this, and when we go have conversations, and to me, that ought to be one of our goals next year, is to really focus on that judicial center. And there's $1 million in there for capital projects that can help with some more planning or doing something. I know we're going to be needing that. So that's fine with me.
And this may help y'all if you don't mind. What I would recommend is and I talked to finance staff and they also agree with this, instead of taking it out and putting it in a new account. So it's in an unassigned fund balance, just call it assigned fund balance. So it stays there. You put a name on it like you want to. You can change that. We're not going to be moving money around. It'll be there and we can access it. And it would take another action to activate it, but that would come when we, like anything else, all these SPOS projects, when you say we're going to approve the concept, preliminary plans, whatever, then you can activate those funds at that time. So I know that that'll help finance staff if you go that route.
That's fine.
Hold up, Melissa.
So
Commissioner Fish, are you finished?
very nearly.
Okay.
So I think just because
Commissioner Fish is going to be next.
hearing Commissioner Hammer's response, I guess, curious what others in the room think, but if there's kind of agreement with what it seems like we're angling toward here, maybe we can find a mix of assigned fund balance for some judicial center to emphasize the priority and whatever we kind of agree are the higher priority capital things that, whether I listed them on here or not, if there's something else that stuck out to you all in the budget, but those are the ones that stuck out to me based on our past discussions and which departments we're focusing on. So I guess just before I yield the floor, I want to share that if we take this is written on my paper right now, I don't have a screen, so just try to follow my words here, but if you take the 329 from ARPA that we've got to move, that brings us up to 10.3 million. And then you subtract the 17,000 in savings we get from correcting the ballistic vests and the cardiac monitors. And then you add the 70K we need for City Hall security. And then you subtract the revenue that we're getting from the Department of Corrections of 124,000. Before we get into this talking about what to do with the capital projects, we would be about 100,000 under kind of our cap for unassigned fund balance. So we're in good shape there, I think, in terms of everything we're talking about, with a bit of $100,000 buffer. And I think the big things that people are bringing up that remain up for debate that could use up that 100,000 would be the sheriff's office food or this capital project stuff. So
I didn't put the sheriff's office food in there based on, I guess there were some concerns about it. I mean, I'm not, what's going on with the food?
Well, so from a quality standpoint, that comment was made and certainly we're going to investigate that. Let me just say, if you were to privatize our food system, I will argue that you will pay a lot more for it. Now, it sounds like we need to work out some things between the ward and the sheriff regarding food. I would recommend if you're more serious about that, we can do an analysis, financial analysis, so right? I'm not disparaging the sheriff, but you got one number that I don't know what's behind that number. So I'd like to know what's behind that number. What I'm saying is, I don't know how you start two different food operations and save money. Okay, so I'd like to analyze that, and we can come back to you next year with something that's more cogent for you.
So
I've never heard complaints about our food. So I mean, the warden's been doing it for, I mean, ever since I've been on the commission. So I guess I'm trying to understand what the problem is.
I've anecdotally heard from people who've been at the jail or had family at the jail issues with the food. Again, it's anecdotal, but I tend to trust our sheriff not making things up. I don't know if he was picking one specific instance and maybe that functions as a hyperbole for like how persistent of an issue it is, but I guess as long as we can get like, to me, it's a priority that we make sure that people get quality food to eat.
Sheriff's dead right.
And so as long as we're walking away from these budget discussions, making sure we figure that out as soon as possible. I'm not attached to putting dollar figures on it right now if there's a better way. But I really don't want us to be glossing over the potential for there to be like just unacceptable food being fed to people that have no other choice. So
Commissioner Link, Commissioner, Fisher has yielded to you.
I just have a quick comment about the judicial center and a question about T-SLUS. Is there any possibility that some of that could be supplemented with T-SLUS for like the parking decks or infrastructure under like
Parking deck.
driveway
yes.
scaping and stuff? Like,
Driveway, where we can, we can investigate that, but really where T-Splosh helps stormwater is within a road profile like the culvert. Or maybe some ditches, not too far out of the right of way, but not like long runs on private property or even public property that are not associated directly with transportation.
it's not parking deck, it's gonna be expensive.
Now, the parking deck, that's not a bad idea.
Okay. Commissioner,
I just yelled at her because she wanted to go.
I'm getting ready to call your name. Commissioner Fisher is up. No, Commissioner Fisher is up. Y'all serious?
Change gears, trying to give a little bit about our funding this year, and I hope my colleagues will support this. We're gonna fund a lot of nonprofits this year within our budget, and I want to request that at least on a quarterly basis, I understand we got the dashboard, but I'd like to see something emailed to me, no more than 1 or 2 pages about their data, what impact they're making, who are the serving, and just give us a snapshot of what's going on. That way, and then next year when it comes around, we can better understand what their mission is and what they're doing. And is it really making an impact on our community? So again, I know City Manager, you like to get the consensus of the rest of the commission, but if my colleagues agree, I would like to get some type of reporting from everybody that we're this year and people that we continue to fund right now.
I would love to do that. And what I really would like to know from y'all is what is it that you want to know? Because we can collect that. And if we're not doing it now, we can add to it now. That'll be, if you are picking something they're not already reporting, that will be more of a reporting burden. And anecdotally, you might get, well, they're hassling us.
Be specific.
But if y'all could give us, if you could tell me exactly what you
Give you an example, and again, we give them very little money, but the access to tutorial program every month, they on point. They tell us how many young people, children that they're serving. They tell us what impact or what are they doing when it comes to their testing, their reading, their math and stuff like that. They even doing demographics, right now among race and also among grades. I think, and I know each nonprofit is different, but I think for me, we can always ask, okay, who are you serving? That's one. What has been the outcome? Are you providing this? And how are you spending your dollars? So
If you, and since you have mentioned this before, and if everybody agrees, why don't you and I sit down and we'll sketch out what that can look like. I'll circulate it amongst the commissioners, let y'all pile on, and then we'll come out with a report that will, we'll start to ask for those things.
But don't make it, a couple of pages at the moment. I don't want 5 or 6 pages.
And I would also add, those commissioners that do not want it, they'll let you know.
Well, but I think it's important because you've mentioned outcomes too. I think it's important.
I'm important, but I know there is.
Well, you don't have to open it, I guess.
Again, I don't, what we don't want, that's why I said, if my colleagues say, you know what, we don't want to do it, then I yield space.
No, we're going to do it.
No, I'm not saying that I need a consensus to tell me that. I'm saying that since you've got some great ideas, I don't need them to tell me this. You help me script
Okay.
exactly what you want to see, and then we'll pass it out. And I'm not saying, we can do that, but maybe Commissioner Thornton has a couple things or, and we'll pull together the right report format, so you don't have to be asking for this next year.
Because I think it's important that the community know that whoever we spend these dollars with for our nonprofits, that they're doing what we asking them to do. I think, and then, and we can be, we hold them accountable, or we can be accountable to our taxpayers for giving those dollars. The last thing I want to say, I'm not sure whether or not the mayor or you was gonna bring it up, Manager Williams, the document last night that
I
we
was gonna
saw
bring it up.
from the,
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber. I was told, I didn't know what y'all was talking about. And that's on me, because I should have pulled the document out. But that was not the document that they're gonna be using for the money that they're asking us for. So what we saw last night should
Can you
be.
give us a new one too?
A new-
Well, too, right?
Now, you still didn't put a dollar amount, but what I asked them to do, work session that we saw, that's what the program should look, in essence, should look like. I just want.
But there's a dollar amount on the, one we saw last night. The wrong one.
The wrong one, that was not a dollar amount.
I thought it was, where did I see the 1 point?
There was a total dollar amount, but I think the
It was a
request was for kind of some
breakdown.
line items.
Right, and
Yeah.
it was a work session that you missed,
Yeah.
there was a breakdown.
I know about the breakdown now, but last night I was just talking.
Okay.
Commissioner, Davenport, we're gonna take a break, okay? Which one? We're gonna take a 5-minute break. Manager Williams has answers to several of our questions. And then when we do that, I'm just gonna make a quick round. Everybody make your last statement, and we're going to try to be out of here by 10 after. Okay? 8:15, 8:15, okay? All right, Manager Williams.
Okay, there were several questions, in no particular order. You asked about cameras, got something for you there. Thanks for the break. Jail food, I can give you a little more insight into that. The compost specialist that came up, Mr. Justice, set me right on that. And then Commissioner Myers has been asking me for the last few days about NTMP balance and not so big. So, starting in that order, so cameras, I did remember general amount of money that was Commissioner Thornton's CDO back then. I forgot what the actual cost of the cameras are. And it turns out it's cheaper than I just told you, so that's good. And it turns out that there's 3 different types of cameras that we bought the first go around, although Suki is now, Solid Waste Director Jansen's asking for some flock cameras. Now, there's a public safety piece to that. Just if you got a flock, you're gonna have public safety, and we can work with them on that. But those 3 cameras I told you about, they roughly run about a little over $600 or so, which we'd say 2,000. So 2,000 buys you a set of 3. And so that can help you kind of do an order of magnitude. So if you do $30,000, that'll get you 15 sets of 3. That's good.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
So, what we put those, we strategically put those around.
So I can't remember. I think we went to where the problem was that got that on the, and then once we had that problem addressed, we kind of reverse engineered a policy about how do we move that around. So I don't have that committed to memory, but what happens is much like you're saying, solid waste staff becomes aware of problem areas. And it's sort of, I guess I'd liken it to those radar speed signs, you know, we go put them here for a while and deal with it, and then we go somewhere else. That's the great. Now with a flock camera, y'all, I can't speak to that because that's going to be, that's more complicated and more expensive. But so far, the cameras that Commissioner Thornton got us started on have been effective. All right, with regards to jail food. So I appreciate y'all considering just letting us try and work it out with the sheriff. You know, I know he's upset about it. Turns out that there was an email, a day or two I'd seen and staff brought it to my attention. So there is an allocation of food money for the sheriff, and it gets transferred to corrections to pay for that. And what sheriff staff is saying is we think that we might be able to start some food operations within the budget we already have. So we would like the opportunity to sit down and talk with them about what that looks like. So what I'm telling you is, and I don't want to speak for the sheriff, but it doesn't look like we need extra allocation this year. And if they can keep it within that food budget, then that's really the prerogative of the sheriff. Now, if they start coming back and asking for increases, then we need to look at what the efficiency is, because y'all got a lot of different priorities. So looks like that might be okay. You may want to check with the sheriff on that. So
Can I just
yeah.
follow on that real quick?
Yes, sir.
If others here agree, can that meeting between your office and the sheriff's office happen ASAP? I guess I would just feel a lot better if we have that resolved sooner rather than later, or at least get an update on what we're hearing from y'all. Maybe not before the budget.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I will at least give you some more clarity, and I will talk to the sheriff myself. Now, whether or not we get both staffs down and do a holistic review of it, that's not, probably won't happen before.
But just getting the ball rolling at least.
Yeah. Yes. Well, actually, I'm not telling you this out of school. This is an email that came from sheriff staff to our staff. So that conversation's already going on. So we're already going down there. Okay, the compost specialist. So, you know, the landfill fund's been suffering for some years, and it was suffering, so of all the things we do, y'all, we do sell recyclables, okay? And that is a highly variable market. So one year it might be great, you know, the commodities market's great for aluminum and plastics and things like that. The next year it can tank, so it's highly variable, which makes it difficult for, you know, those recovering those funds. And about, I don't know, right before COVID, maybe right at COVID, recycling commodities market tanked. And it really, we struggled. So at that time, y'all, for years, it had been structured where ironically, the recycling efforts were paid for out of landfill tipping funds and fees. And that makes sense to me. You know, you want to cut down on the landfill tipping fees by doing recycling. But what you're effectively doing to that enterprise fund is you're paying for costs to put it out of business. That's fine. You're going to hear about escalating costs for this new cell that we're trying to open. And so about 4 years ago, we said, you know, and y'all, this has been something since I've come here, and I really appreciate budget staff. We just had some cost centers that weren't, they shouldn't have been married together. Okay. And so what we said to y'all was that if you keep burdening the landfill enterprise fund with recycling costs, which arguably, if you talk about taxpayer equity, you know, you got landfill users that are paying a fee, and the recycling education benefits all. Okay, sort of like leaf and limb, right? Solid waste, the collection charges those customers within the old city limits, if you will, a fee. But leaf and limb is paid for out of general fund because everybody benefits from that. Now, some folks would like it picked up more often, of course. So all that being said, budget staff and I would both recommend. We started several years ago that we had $1 million a year that was going towards recycling program that was coming out of landfill. And we told you a few years ago and you agreed. And like most things, we had a 3-year plan to get out of it. So there were 3 successive years. I don't know, we may have taken a break or something 1 year because of the priorities of the commission. But over 4 years, we did a 3-year funding plan. We transferred $300,000 from the landfill of cost to general fund. And we completed that last year, I think. So now comes this compost specialist. You might say, well, there's a compost pile at the landfill, but it really is a program education, which is effectively recycling. So if you want to honor the cost centers as you voted before, then it really probably shouldn't come out of landfill fees. It should come out of general fund.
Okay.
Now, and then NTMP after that.
Okay.
And what's the total cost of that position if we wanted to fund it? Because they'd given us the amount for just the salary. 79?
It's 79,000.
Can I ask a question about that, if you don't mind? Is there a reason why the recycling coordinator couldn't do both? I mean, is that?
Well,
because, you know, we have that recycling, but we have that education fee, remember that, with the outreach?
Well, Suki, Director Jansen and her staff are really stepping up. So we've taken over a pilot composting route that if you haven't heard about, you'll hear more about. There was a private entity that was doing that.
Right.
And sort of, we took over that. And really, Commissioner Hamby, I guess it goes back to the 2008 era where the commission said, you know, within so many years, we want to reduce our waste stream. And we did all the easy stuff, and now we're at food waste composting, and it's, you know, it's a messy business. But we're starting a pilot, and you know, I think the idea is if this is a thing, you know, people have to be. It's going to be a full-time job, I think Suki would say.
Okay.
How do we know it's a thing?
Well, we're going to do the pilot, and you know, you can direct us either way, but so the pilot was done in the Boulevard neighborhood and the participation was very high.
Well, it is going to be a boulevard.
Well, and that's Commissioner Hamby.
Backyard.
I think you're right. I said that. And they said, well, we did want to start where we can find some success. So it's not going to be as successful perhaps in other neighborhoods where people don't understand. But once they understand, because it takes a little bit of extra effort to do, right? You got to be committed. That's what the specialist would offer.
Nothing against boulevard.
No, I know.
Okay, we're gonna start with Carol. What do you want to close it with?
You were gonna talk about neighborhood traffic then.
Yes.
Whether or not there's.
Look, I got one more. All right.
That last
We're
one.
gonna get ahead 20 after now.
I'm sorry, y'all. The answer to the question is, why is there such a big number? It's tiered over several years. So there was $1 million in T-Splosh 23 for the NTMP, Neighborhood Traffic Management Program. As of May 24, there's a remaining balance of $940,000. Now that seems large, however, it's tiered across several years, and we will provide a follow-up spreadsheet that shows that. So for instance, for FY25, the T-Splosh budget for this project is $196,000. So there's a corpus of funds that are supposed to live the rest of the program. The next tranche of it, or tier of it, as we call it, is right around $200,000. And then the rest of the 940 will be spread out over the ensuing years. Now, there were some general fund capital NTMP programs that were approved last year, and almost all of that got bundled into this year's NTMP, now named the Residential Traffic Management Program. And as you know, it's more than we've ever done, and we've started, thank goodness. So for the next few years, we're going to assume the program. So that was a one-time capital. So if you want that to to make that again next year, unlike operating, which, once it's in, it goes in until you take it out. Capital is just one time every year. So if you want to do that, renew that again, you'll have to do that. So we're assuming if you don't, that the NTMP program and a spreadsheet I'll provide you, and I can tell you what it looks like, will be 100% T-Splosh unless you choose to augment it with general fund capital.
Can you summarize? Can you make it easier for me still? There's 200,000 for this coming year. I thought we were like almost finished with T-Splosh. There's how many more years of funding?
Well, this is the 23.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about the 26 Splosh. So
Right. So we still have.
There's 5 tiers.
26, there's two years. But there's $200 to 200,000 from T-Splosh for this coming year.
Here, I'm looking at the tier now and I'll share it with you. But so the 9 months left in the FY23 budget, we had 147,000. And then next year, in this year's budget, it's 196,000. And then in FY25 will be for the tier 196,000, 26, 196,000, 27 budget FY ending in June 30th, 27, 196,000. And then there's a few months estimated to finish out in FY28. Remember, it ends when we reach the collections, and that's about $50,000.
And how much did we spend this year?
I don't know what.
It's about 800 from where.
It's a big program.
I think $500,000 approximately added to
So
that
we need to
function.
add maybe 300,000 to that if we wanted to do equivalent of what we did this year.
Or you could look and take some money away, as soon as we got T-Splosh coming up, you could take some of those future tiers.
You could reallocate those. Commissioner Hamby makes an excellent point. So we're ahead in collections. So it will end sooner.
Yeah.
Right. I think a few months ago, we were tracking 10 months ahead of time from when we originally saw it. So you could tighten this up a little bit. You could bring some tier funding forward and then end it. And we'll know more about that, I think, when we get into July.
So if it's when Commissioner Hamby and Hool, meet up and finish this off, they could,
One more Hamby-Hool Summit.
oh my goodness, they could, see if there needs to be money in there for
I
that.
guess I'm next in your cruise chat.
Blaine, isn't there enough, isn't the T-Splosh from each of the districts involved in this at all?
No, ma'am. This is a countywide program,
Okay.
but it's a bucket. And then you tell us the priorities. So staff using the criteria associated with the program brings you a list of projects.
Well, who did you ask me to send you names for, and I did?
That was the user group for North Avenue projects.
Carol, I guess what I'm saying is it probably is not necessary to add more money to the budget this year since we've got a collection rate that's
Okay.
quicker.
Sure, just.
Yeah.
And along those lines,
Wait, am I understanding correctly per her suggestion that we could, as part of this budget action, also add a section for T-Splosh and say we want to move that tranche, you called it, forward?
what I'd like to ask you to consider is we haven't done it in a long time, but every once in a while, we bring to you an agenda item form, a work session, a reshuffling of the tiers based on interest that's coming in, projects that are short, like the animal shelter, projects that have a little extra money, like the fire protection, I can tell you that DC Kelly from ACCPD is going to be coming to you asking for some of the 911 funds that tiers to come forward in time because we really need to replace them now. So in fairness to you, all of y'all, you want to see all those chess pieces and you want to arrange them in the way you want to. I do that all at one time, and we like to come to you in the fall to do that.
Do you need us to tell you that, or are you planning to anyway?
No, well, we're planning on telling you.
So do you need to
Trying to figure out, do you figure us from clear direction, or is it just
No.
gonna happen?
No, it's really, considering kind of maintenance of the T-Splosh program, it's about time. So we're gonna come to you.
Okay,
Is
make it
feel
look,
satisfied with that, Commissioner Myers, or do you still want to?
Yes,
okay. All right, Commissioner Myers, close us out. What's your issue?
I am feeling very positive because we have the sun coming up with our two colleagues here who will put
Okay.
this together.
Commissioner Lane,
I'm feeling good, especially knowing that we will have a new T-Splosh to work with. I'm hoping that we can, take care of some of those needs that meet immediate dangers, but,
Commissioner Davenport. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lane. I'm
I'm
sorry.
one of those
Wait a
ones,
minute, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
Okay.
I like to soak things in, but I'm feeling optimistic and feeling good. I do have a question about the affordable housing piece, maybe in an email or individually. Like the $5 million just seemed like a bucket, I hate buckets. It's when different commissioners get together, they tend to sway or change their ideals. So we can work something out with, I like Commissioner Poole's, their recommendation, because it's more specified. And, other than that, the cameras is very important to me, but everything is good.
Commissioner Moore?
How much do we need for your camera? What would that cost?
So 15K. Right, that's for 3.
No, actually,
30.
2,000 for 3, so it's a lot cheaper than I told you, and I'm sorry. I was remembering, yeah, so these cameras, y'all, I mean, they're not, they're $500 a piece, but $600, so we'd say 2,000 for a set of 3.
So they're like wildlife cameras.
They're a higher
Staff
grade.
Make use of those with existing staff time without us having to.
Mr. Justice knows all about it.
Those three they're different. Though. You have a license plate computer, you have the wireless, and then you have one that basically, don't think of it as like you're buying 3 different locations.
You need all that together to do that one job. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying.
And so how many of those are you asking us to consider, Commissioner Davenport?
At least 4 of those.
That'd be 8,000?
Yeah.
Take it down.
Commissioner Hall?
Got a lot of numbers written down here, but I'm almost there, so just give me a second with that, so.
We'll come back to you. Commissioner Taylor?
I was waiting to see if he's gonna pop back up. I'm feeling very optimistic as well. I'm glad, it's not like last year. I don't really feel that much pressure. I like the housing, I like the housing. I like it on both. Jesse's, yours is spelled out, but that I think 5 million because of where we are now. As far as housing goes, I don't want us to wait until we have something in the strike fund to begin building and purchasing, because like I said, my district, we don't have time to wait. But other than that, I'm fine.
Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I'm okay too. I think, well, I thank Commissioner Hall and Commissioner Hamby for putting this together, and I'm walking us through this. Thank you for a good exercise. Like back and forth between us. But again, and I can be flexible on how we think. I just think, I just love what they're doing in Atlanta. And I just think it can be, we probably use the same thing. I like Commissioner Link idea about getting private dollars involved in this housing thing. I think it can really, and that's what they do in Atlanta. They're in with grants, where we can get our business, our partners involved, especially with new companies coming to town. They may want to, pitch in to help us find the employees, houses, and stuff. And I hope we would, move forward with the workforce development funds, and pass that.
Commissioner Hull, and then we're gonna go back to Commissioner Davenport.
One quick thing. I just got one.
Yeah, go.
So we're good with it until we hear from Blaine on the sheriff office food. Right, so that's question mark right now.
We'll work it out, but you will get some more detail prior to your vote. We don't pretend to have a solution, but I hope you will feel assured that good conversations are happening.
All right, so mini summit with Commissioner Hamby on the break. I think we're in agreement, but please say aloud if we are or are not. So the capital projects that I highlighted, if we fund those, so basically funding what you see on that list from mine, but cutting the upgrade overhead street name signs, that would total 1.75 million, about roughly 1,756,800. And so that plus 1.25 million for the judicial center, which we'll just leave as judicial center supplement and call it assigned fund balance in the note column. So if we make those adjustments and if we add in the compost position, and if we add in 10K for 5 litter camera systems, then that would leave us with still above where we need to be on fund balance by 328,000. And I think the only thing that would leave that's not seemed to have been in agreement so far in the room would be that does keep the sheriff's office salaries in there still, which is something that was in both of ours, but I know we put this thing in the room, so. I guess we could get together and hash out the details of what to make sure we have in the note columns and make sure we got our numbers right with finance, but.
But don't forget, you can reduce that community partnership.
Oh, yeah, I didn't say that out loud, but that does include that. That's why we're still in the green or still in the black, is because finance let us know that with the way the timing works out for the community partnership program, we can achieve the goal that was written in here of a million even for the next round that goes out by just adding 129 rather than 450. So we can retain that same line item for less.
You gonna send that to us?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, well, I mean, so does that match what are you good at that?
I think Chris was gonna say
Yeah,
something.
no, I was just gonna say that includes the 550, just in the mayor's recommended, plus the 370. I think it was 321 that was added May 7th. That was actually the first amendment to the FY25 budget. So
Yeah.
that's it there.
So this number thought that we had to add that again, but that was clarified that we don't for that to still proceed like that. So, so yeah, we'd be in a good place. And if there's any lingering, like asks like Commissioner Davenport's cameras, there's a little bit of room for that too. Or if we find out in the next couple of days that we really need to put money for, food at the sheriff's office.
My takeaway is, Commissioner Manager Williams is going to, get with Deborah Gonzalez about the 100,000 or whatever is left for the, advocacy, support for victims of domestic violence and gang violence, really. Hopefully, that'll just be able to lower, we would know.
And to clarify, heard you say a few phrases, but if possible, if there is some funds available, you would like to see those funds used to engage African-American counselors, psychiatrists to be at the front and center of victim assistance if possible. Okay, I got it.
And my other thing is I didn't meet with folk, but I did kind of poll folk. I'm still looking for, well, I said I wanted $1 million for North Ave, but I would like to get those figures from you now that you know the area that I'm talking about, what that area, what it would cost to do the infrastructure on 106. And I would also ask you to look at 72. I'm really concerned about 106. but 72 needs infrastructure work also, so let me know what that is. And, Commissioner Lake suggested I have a little plan, so once I get the dollars, I'm going to ask that, either come from one of the buckets of workforce development. My primary issue is, concerned is 106, but 72 is also my district, so.
72 from Boyles to the county line.
Yep.
Thank you, clarifying.
To Jack's, isn't that county? Going up.
Yes.
Madison, yes. So those are my takeaways, Mike.
As we're talking about it, Blaine, maybe Allison, I know this is important to her. So that's the bulk waste.
Bulky waste, clarify that for you.
Just how much that would be so that we could add that in as well.
Oh, the solid waste request to get that program going more.
I guess that's what it is. Yeah, Allison knows more about it. So whatever that, I guess somebody's throwing away a mattress, we come pick it up for them or something. Is that what that means?
I mean, would that be off fee-based pickup? I would.
I don't know that it would. I don't know how it would work.
I think-
you know.
So the solid waste advisory, it won't be fee-based. Part of,
It's an added service.
there'll be an added service because it's actually costing us a lot now just to deal with.
Pick them up.
There was-
Yeah, I think it's a cost saving thing.
I would think if they're like,
Well, there would be define universe of material pickup and the other thing.
or how many times you can do the one address. Certain.
Well, let me do this. Let me check with Suki and get you a better policy. Now, the budget analyst for solid waste knows more than I do. Justice, you got anything to offer?
Bulky, excuse me. The request for that bulky waste program is 205,000. That includes operating in 2 positions.
Okay, so we could add that and we'd still have 100,000 left over. Do you want to do that
I think so. I think that would help with that.
$300,000 capital request.
separately?
So that'd be the
Get equipment.
So we don't have enough.
300 capital, 200 for the operator.
You don't have to get the budget done tonight. You just.
Literally our last public meeting to talk about it, so.
That could be a cost purchase, couldn't you? We're buying a truck for that?
You could initiate mid-year if you want to have.
Buy garbage trucks with T-spots?
We could do a mid-year like that, and I mean, if we need to take the judicial center down to 1 million even, I'll be fine with that, just.
Get that in there, okay.
Right.
Yeah, that would do it. If we brought that down to 1 million even, that would do it, yeah.
And just, but again, y'all pay me to tell you things like this. It's one-time fees and you're creating ongoing initiatives. So next year, that'll be just less that you'll be able to access.
Let me, so I wanted that one, but also wanted to ask, and I'm hoping this could be something for next year for revenue. And I'll go back to the red light cameras and how, in the past, we were collecting $500,000 a year off the fines for that. So what is it gonna cost? What does it cost to get us the red light? You may not know off the top of your head, but.
Well, usually, even though we pre-fund it, it usually we try and, we can't control who runs red lights. It's not to make revenue, it's for safety purposes. But what we have found historically is that the revenues from the tickets usually cover the cost of the camera.
Right.
The big sticking point is that GDOT has to approve the placement of it. So we got to find the right intersection, get them to approve.
So I guess I'd like to see something this year about.
An initiative come forward next year.
Come forward.
That's helpful.
With that, in that same note also, and I know we put somebody else over in the municipal court to help with traffic citations.
Yes.
So, in the Downtown Development Authority, after you have 3 or 4 tickets, they'll send you a letter saying it's doubled and hey, and they get a pretty good response off that letter.
Yes, sir.
And I don't know, I guess I'd like to see what sort of follow-up.
I think it's similar. We just have been overtaxed. They can only process so many.
Okay.
But I'll clarify.
Because you see where I'm going. I mean, the numbers for those citations.
There's some latent money there.
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Commissioner Myers, Commissioner Hull, and since this is our last meeting, public, we'll still be mindful of the time, but let's try to get.
Mayor Pro Tem, I do have some more information for you, if I can get in line too. You can't see me over here, so. I think you want to know what I gotta say.
Oh,
I like everything.
Commissioner Hull's budget had reduced the youth did not include the youth cadet program doubling in it. That's $90,000. And I, tried to find something we had, we're talking a lot about outcomes. And I know nothing about how the program went. We never got any data on how it went in year one in there. I don't think in the Outlook, I couldn't find any.
Their report,
Was there a report? Maybe you could send it to,
and just to be, did include it in that spreadsheet.
Yeah, I did see that you kept it in, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have another mini follow-up report, hopefully not too much longer, and certainly before a deadline of next Wednesday, if possible, to get all this baked into an agenda item for y'all. Whatever the solution is.
some kind of, report on that and what's happened, like how many people started, how many people finished, are they continuing? Like, where's it going? If we're gonna spend another 90,000 on it.
Commissioner Devon.
Yeah, I thought our last budget meeting is June 5th, right?
That's the.
Yeah, but I usually hash things out there too.
Remember last night's budget?
Ideally, we never do.
So
Sure you do.
Was very acceptable.
what staff would like, and I think the public what we work to do is get that in on a Wednesday and maybe get it out by Friday so that the public can see what y'all have agreed to, as opposed to the last minute and do it CDO on the floor. In case that doesn't give us a lot of time to react or make sure the math's right.
So I guess,
Yes, sir.
but my two-part question is, because this is our last meeting about this before we put something forward, and I think it would be wonderful for us to not hash something on the floor in the meeting. I think that was messy and no one. I guess I'm curious, Mayor Pro Tem, do you like the idea if my colleague across the aisle there is willing for Commissioner Hamby and I to meet up and put together what we've talked about today? Slash, does anyone in the room have any unsaid things that you want us to change before we?
I think that's an excellent idea. I think we're so much better and closer than we were in the past. I don't think y'all will kill each other. So I think we'll be just fine. Mr. Hamby, would you meet with?
I can Tuesday if you
Yeah,
want.
the mayor has offered to fund refreshments.
Oh, all right.
There's liquid.
We're gonna leave it in your hands. Just remember.
They might take a flight to
North Avenue.
Colorado. Yeah.
Just remember about North Avenue. Anybody? Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, okay. So two things, sounds like some good stuff coming together. There is an agenda item that you have from the sheriff, and it has to do with mental health, medical transport. And so in there is a request to make the sheriff's office whole for 92,000 for this year. But they've also put in there an allocation for next year, which is based on what they're projecting, but that hasn't happened yet. And so if you approve that as is, that's another $200,000 you'll have to account for in the budget stall. So that may not be readily apparent, so I wanted to pull that out.
But don't we get an opportunity in January or sometime next year to do budget amendments?
Well, you could do a budget amendment in any given cycle.
Okay.
And that's generally what we do and that's what we'd recommend, because they're asking right now for contingency for next year. I'd say wait till it happens and make them whole.
I think that would be the best.
So I'm not advocating either way. I'm just telling you that if you approve it as is, then that's gonna be another commitment there. And then the other thing, y'all.
Figure, that exact figure?
So it's in the agenda item, but 92,000, I'm recommending you approve to make them whole for this
We
year.
have to add into this. 200 even?
200 even.
But
But you're saying-
Blaine is saying that's just.
Don't do that now.
Don't do it right now. Do it if they need it.
Yeah.
When and if they need it.
And we can amend the budget next year.
Like right now, he's asking that you amend this year's budget because he's running behind in
So
expenses.
that I follow.
And I'm saying.
Because we're pretty close to the razor thin margin of what's available above fund
Saying not
balance.
to put anything else.
But anything.
I would say
To vote on it.
what I'm saying is the normal flow is find out what the exact expenses are and pick them up next year, as opposed to just setting aside money that you're trying to figure out for something that hasn't happened yet. Now, the other thing, y'all, is we have several buckets, Davenport, of affordable housing money. Okay, one of them, I mentioned, Commissioner Hamby brought up today. So there's 3.3 million left in the SPOS 2020. Okay, but there's also the Affordable Housing Special Revenue Fund, okay? And historically, so back, gosh, 5, 6 years ago, the commission created this because every year the Housing Authority would bring forward a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, because services go to those properties, they don't pay taxes. And so way in the past, and y'all can probably, that got started. So every year, Rick Parker would come down with about $130,000 check and went in the general fund. Y'all said, stop that. We want to redirect that for affordable housing. Then y'all passed an inclusionary zoning program. And so we had collected some funds from the Housing Authority, close to $1 million. And then recently we had a shot of about 1.7 million from one of these inclusionary zoning deals. So all of a sudden that was 2.7 million. Now the mayor took $1 million from that fund, not the general fund, for the strike fund. That's where it came from. Okay, and I'm not sure, Commissioner Hamby, if that went back in there or not, but I'm just letting y'all know. So if it was 2.7 million was the balance, and you took $1 million out for the mayor's strike fund, and then an agenda item in this cycle with the Housing Authority, the $600,000 loan through the ADA. Okay, the short story on that was I thought it was supposed to be splossed. We've come to find out that DCA didn't like that. And so the agenda item that you have before you is to swap the 600,000 sploss, which DCA doesn't think we should use, with 600 from the Affordable Housing Revenue Program. So 2.7 million minus $1 million minus 600,000. I don't know if you're putting it back in there. That leaves you $1 million plus the 3.3 of SPLOST. So now that's 4.3 million of non-general fund dollars that's out there for those purposes, which is close to 5. I'm not suggesting you do anything differently, but that's there. So.
And to
Don't even mention it.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
okay, we
If
good.
you wanted to draw down that fund, you could leave a bigger buffer.
Yeah.
Okay,
or we could, what we're doing here, but I mean, what my goal was for us to discuss it. We got an attachment in one of our many reports from staff that spelled out recommendations for taking that special revenue fund and creating sub-projects, 3 sub-projects specifically, one of which is. So what I'm proposing we do is take whatever amount we want to put in, and I guess we could also note what's in there already and dedicate it to those specific sub-projects. And if we wanted to leave like an amount just floating in like the general special revenue fund to go into one of those 3, sure, but like to at least get those 3 sub-projects going. So it's not just sitting there in the ether, waiting for someone to decide in the future, but there is momentum to say, let's do the strike fund, let's do the gap financing for Light Tech, and let's do the stuff that Commissioner Taylor's been emphasizing, single family housing stuff. So I think that's what I'd like to see us do with whatever the amount is that we put in there. And I like the amount that we've talked about today being added to what we've already got to really make a difference. Because the whole premise of the affordable housing investment strategy is that the money we put in is what we put in to get back from private sector and from the feds to grow that 5 million into, I think they said like up to 40 million. I mean, there's like a lot of money we can get back if we're funding on the front end. So I wouldn't count what we've already gotten as an example of substituting what that study's calling for. It's an example of what that study says we'll get more of if we put this funding in.
And I just wanted to belabor, y'all are trying to activate general funds, and I hate for that just to sit fallow while you're putting those general fund dollars. So just so you know, the bolus of money that you can work with, that's what.
I know one last comment on affordable housing. I like the idea of getting a little bit more direction because it could use a little bit more direction to staff about where to go with this.
That's my point.
Yeah, and so something to think about, y'all.
That's fine.
Do we need to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
No, they can't.
Right, a motion from Commissioner Fisher, a second from Commissioner Taylor. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Adjourn.
I'm okay with that. Moving forward, even though I know it's not.
Thanks.